California. Okay, so welcome, Catherine, to my podcast.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thank you.
Nice to do this on a Friday.
Friday night, actually, right? Where are you now?
I'm in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and I'm in my Power Pieces studio where I make all of the bracelets and jewelry and accessories that I have old comic books that I use, and it's like I'm living in my creative zone here. It's my happy place.
Okay. How long do you live in New York?
50 years.
50 years. So I see a Captain American book there. Is that a book or magazine?
It's a magazine. It's a graphic novel, actually. It's a compendium of all of the Captain America Fighting Chance. That was the series that Mark Grunewald, my husband, worked on. He wrote Captain America longer than anyone, so he wrote it for 10 years, but this was a very popular time for him to be writing Captain America because they were going to cancel it, and he took it on and he made it relevant. Before, Captain America was just this rah patriot with kind of a one-dimensional character, and Mark gave him so much depth and so much pathos and emotion and levels of range of emotion that you wouldn't think a soldier would have.
So he was more like a flat character, and he made the character
because he was just a Nazi bashing, patriot, rah patriot.
And do you know who created the Captain America first, the flat character?
Jack Kirby and Stan Lee, and Joe Simon, and they all. Mark always says that he wrote it longest, but he didn't create it. So it had already been created in 1941, and Stan Lee and all those guys were very tuned into the headlines. So all of the comic book characters at Marvel were all associated with things that were happening in real life, because Marvel is set in reality. It's the same president. It's the same, cities have the real names. They're not like DC made up Gotham City. And though there is no such place as Gotham City. But New York was in Marvel. So, New York, it's not there's nothing fantasy about the Marvel. It's set in reality. So
it's a mix of fiction and reality, right?
Yeah, it's basically but it's set in reality. It's set in reality, whether or not it adheres to those principles, because superheroes have superpowers and they're better and bigger and stronger and faster than all of us, but they have dilemmas too. So Marvel was always known for giving characters depth and conflicts and despair and the complete roller coaster of emotions that you could possibly imagine, because that's reality too.
So I'm going to ask a question. Is it possible for you to take out your glasses?
Sure.
It has a big reflex. Is that okay? Can you see the screen? No problem. Okay, that's better. So basically, you can say Mark infused some soul on the Captain American character that he
very much so.
Okay,
very much so.
Tell me more about your life with Mark. How did that start?
It was a lot of intense fun. He was an incredibly devoted, at the time when I met him, he was already the senior executive editor of Marvel Comics. So he was already the #2 guy.
So what year was that? What year?
That was 1990 when I met him, 1990. and then that was December 1990. And then we started to date in January of 91 because we let the holiday happen because we didn't really know each other. He went back to Wisconsin, and we had the holiday, and then we got together in January. And I think that was kind of a great way to start the year because probably by February we went up to see my niece, so we were already very, very intertwined with each other in a very short period of time, because I knew he had been divorced, and I didn't realize that when I met him at 38 that I wasn't going to be able to get a guy who didn't have some kind of history and didn't have a child or a divorce or a past relationship that he went through. And I was
because you were 30. You were 38.
I was 38 when I met him.
Got it.
And so, I don't know what I was thinking, that I was going to get this guy who had a clean slate. And, my friends were like, give him a chance. I mean, at least he tried, and at least he tried to, have a great, have a marriage that worked. And then he had a child. And so he was trying. So, and they were right, because if I had had somebody at 38 who had never been married, could have been, where he was very stilted in his emotions. They could have been stilted in his emotions, whereas Mark was perfectly, he was real. He knew who he was. He knew what he wanted. He didn't want anybody to get in his way. His career was very, very important to him, but he was balanced. It wasn't like my career first and then my wife and then my child, and everything was kind of on the same level. And he was excellent at time management. So I knew I was on that timeline where I was very, very important to him, but I never asked him to choose his career, which he was obsessed with, over me. And that's what his wife and girlfriend had said, when are you going to stop writing those comic books and pay attention to me? And I loved the fact that he was an artist, that he had a great job, that he was fulfilled, and I didn't have to be anything for him, just me, so I think people go into relationships and they say, oh, she's going to be my everything, and I don't want to be somebody's everything. That to me is too much pressure. And so he was perfectly balanced. He wrote, he knew exactly when he needed to write, and he, it's almost like he had a schedule, and he had a time and a place for everything. So, and he wasn't constantly doing comic books. He was
many hours
thinking about it.
How many hours he worked per day?
Well,
approximately.
He went 9 to 5, but he would come home, and it was almost like a record executive having a band, so in the evening he wrote comic books. So he would write from 6:30 until 10:30, and then like 4 hours after work. But it was a completely different part of his brain. So he was an creative administrator during the day, but at night he got to write the characters that he he oversaw in the Marvel universe. So it was great, and I appreciated his finding out what he wanted to do and what he knew his place was, and that I was very much included in that. And he always would bring you into the Marvel family. So immediately upon dating him, I think I was in the neighborhood of Marvel, and I called him up and I said, I'm in the neighborhood, should I stop up? And he said, yeah. So he had a terrible marriage, and his girlfriend had just passed away from cancer after he stayed with her for 3 years. So he was
so wait, he had a marriage,
yeah,
and then he had a girlfriend after the marriage,
yeah,
that died?
she died of cancer. She had melanoma, or whatever. It was the disease you get from a bad sunburn. And
Yeah, I
so
think so.
yeah, so she died, and I mean, God bless him, he stayed with her, but she was another one who was, didn't really appreciate his profession. And so when I met him, everybody was so happy that he met somebody, because Mark was the kind of guy who, he believed in the institution of marriage. He believed in your job being, a fulfilling one. And he believed in being a good son and a great husband and a wonderful community leader. And, he believed in all those institutions where I kind of doubted them sometimes. You because I'm not real fond of corporate America, and I'm not, my comedy group lambasted all of what Reagan was doing, but he was also he and I shared very, very
He
similar.
was, you can say that he was a patriot.
No, but he was a practical patriot. He was a patriot.
What is the difference between a patriot and a practical patriot?
A patriot is my country, do or die. I truth, justice, and the American way. But he was more, my country better do the right thing and better to pay attention to the people, because Captain America was of the people, and so Mark was very much a common man. And remember when we watched that series Poldark?
Yeah,
that was exactly what he was. He had a rank at his company, but yet he was a commoner. He was of the people, and he himself was a fan turned pro. So it doesn't get more basic than that. I mean, he was a fan of the industry way before he got a job in it. So, but he also knew what people needed, and they didn't need to be exploited, and they didn't need to be trampled on. And so he was very, very fair. He was always there. And I said, I was married to Captain America because he thought like Captain America. He lived his life like he was writing the character, and he couldn't betray the character if he didn't live. And it was almost like an actor studying for a role. He could not he couldn't just tune off Cap. He was always, kind of doing the right thing. And in his mind, he ran with that superhero, mentality. And in his life, he acted like a hero. So,
wow. So you can say that not only his personality reflected in Captain America, but the Captain America also being who he is or was a role model for Mark himself in his life.
Yeah, that's why when they were going to cancel it, he said, "Let me take it on," because he knew that.
Oh, tell me more about it. Tell me more about it. They're going to cancel. Give me some background. Give us.
Yeah, so it was 1985, and there were certain titles that are more popular than others. And as a publishing, I mean, Marvel is a publishing company, and you have to go with, it's a publishing company, basically.
Oh, publishing, right,
is a publishing company. So you have to go.
That was before Marvel became famous with the movies, right?
It was just
that's a huge difference.
Just comic books and some toys, yes, because they did some licensing of toys and action
figures, figures, yeah.
Games and
but no movies,
games, but not yet. The video games had not really started to happen because it was just Pac-Man and like Atari and things like that. So they didn't license the characters out like they did. But the only movies were Batman.
And even if they licensed, there was like a bunch of pixels, right?
Yeah,
it's
right.
Just like probably the cover will be the superhero, but a bunch of squares.
It was totally comic books. It was all just paper. But so the X-Men were incredibly popular. That was probably the most popular title, was X-Men and Spider-Man. And they were going through down the list, and the sales had fallen off for Captain America, and they were going to cancel it, and he wanted to have a book that he could sink his teeth into because he was an executive editor, which means he assigned people jobs and then he edited them. He wrote some things along with some of the other staff members, like he was writing Spider-Man. He was writing, but he didn't have his own book like that he could really sink his teeth into and make.
You mean he was writing? Because I'm not a deep I don't have a deep understanding about this industry. He was writing for other superheroes too, but he didn't have one that he could dedicate exclusively.
Right.
Captain America was this.
He was, on a certain book they assigned people books, and he was working on Spider-Man and Thor, and he created the Contest of Champions, which is the first crossover concept, like a superhero versus another superhero. He created that concept.
Oh, so really?
He did.
What was the first competition between superheroes that he created? Do you remember?
It's in this book that dropped when he got into the Hall of Fame. But this is the book, The Contest of Champions.
Oh.
So that was the book that he first came out with. And it was the first ever Marvel event series that received this exercised treatment. And Grandmaster plays a game of cosmic chess against death. So, it's Grandmaster versus death.
So this is actually a hardcover book. It's not
it's a magazine. And it's a compilation. It's a compilation of
And people can still buy that?
Yeah, they just they dropped.
There's a collectible item. So maybe a collectible item, right?
And the way I did it, because we'll get into that, because I put a jacket over it, and now it's highly collectible. I bought 100 of these, and we'll get into why I did that.
So he decided to basically not resuscitate, but keep Captain America alive.
Yeah, they gave it to him. And I mean, it wasn't an instantaneous hit. He built it, and he I think it was 307, and the issue number was 307 that he first started on, or something like that. So
there was 300 issues of Captain America before.
Yeah, 307.
That's a lot.
Issues. Yeah,
that's a lot.
And it was out since 1941. So,
and this was wow. So each edition is monthly, weekly. What is it?
I think it's bi-weekly.
Bi-weekly, okay.
Yeah, it's like
since 1940s. Wow.
Yeah.
So is there any reason Captain America was being put aside? Is there any connection with a political situation of the United States at that time?
Well, we were down in El Salvador. Ronald Reagan was president. Nixon had just, Nixon hadn't died yet, so Nixon was still very much, the Republicans were in office, and Reagan was he was basically lying to the American people, because we were down in El Salvador, we were down in funding the Sandinistas, and
that was the Contras, the Contra scandal. Okay.
Yep, and Oliver North,
and that was like in the 80s.
Mid 80s.
That was around the time that Sylvester Stallone came with Rambo and Schwarzenegger. Okay,
exactly. And and at the same time, these freaking religious people like Falwell and Moral Majority and all these right to deathers and all those right to lifers were on the peripheral, not like they are now, but they were brewing. And so there was this whole, concept that, America could do no wrong, but we were funding all these operations in the South America. We were we were down there. We
Central
had a
America,
true presence. But
okay, so let me understand
that against
the
that backdrop.
context. Okay, I guess that background. So in a way, the morale of the United States at that time was kind of a little low, or a lot low,
anti-American,
and then the Captain American was going down, and then by stepping up and revitalizing this character, is almost like he's bringing more a sense of hope or patriotism to Americans in general. Would you say that? Or not?
Yes, but it was very balanced.
Yeah, it was like a practical patriotism.
Yeah, Cap was not my country do or die.
Right.
I mean,
yeah.
He had the super soldier serum that he had been injected with. So he he didn't have a superpower. He just knew every martial art. He knew every fighting style. So Cap's superpower was that he just knew how to fight very well. He was a super soldier. And he
didn't have any supernatural power.
Oh, no.
I didn't know that. I didn't.
Nope. He just was very strong, and he was, he took this job on, and he worked for the government. I mean, he was working for the government. Captain America was
in what position? In what position? What role?
Captain America. He was a soldier. He was
as a soldier.
The captain,
not like a. Okay, got it.
No, he was in the military. He was
in the military. Okay,
so
but he didn't use a military uniform.
No, he wore Cap uniform because he was on a special commission. So they he really expanded that whole aspect of Cap, and Cap was always, always for the underdog, always for the his nemesis was Red Skull. He had his villains that he had to buck up against, but nothing was easy for Captain America. He had a lot of conflict. He had a lot of dilemma. He had
inner conflict.
Inner conflict, yeah, because the government will tell you what to do, and you have to choose whether or not you want to be hypocritical or look the other way and do it your way. But there was an actual story that it was Streets of Poison. Well, Streets of Poison was when he was trying to break up the drug rings. Like I said, it was all based in reality. He was trying to break up the drug rings, and he got accidentally stabbed with a needle, and so he went through addiction. So he was addicted. I mean, that's how practically patriotic and conflicted he was. So he was human. So Mark really took that aspect of him and played that to the max, so that he did the right thing. He knew what to do was the right thing, and everybody does know that. I think we have a sense of right or wrong within us. If you're a pathological sociopath, if you're a sociopath, you don't. But any normal person knows what right and wrong is. They choose to do wrong.
Any healthy person, right?
Right. They choose to do wrong. If there's no other recourse.
Or they do wrong out of a trauma.
Exactly. Or they can't help themselves or whatever. But I think that's one of the reasons why people loved what he did with Captain America, because I think we all want to love our country, but we don't want to love our country blindly. We want to know that there is a decision that's been made, and that it's been weighed, and there no smoke screen is being thrown over it. Not lying to the American public.
Transparency.
Right, transparency, exactly. Accountability, and that's what Cap was really fighting for. So he wanted to, he was really working for the people, not the government in his mind. He was gonna be the everyman hero. So it, and
Did
it
he
worked
ever, did
really
Captain
well.
American ever, did Captain America ever thought about becoming like a US president or some position in power that he could actually do this with more authority or resources?
Probably, it's a good question. I'll have to see. I don't think so, because that would have taken him out of. I mean, I'm sure if somebody said you should run for president, and he would say, I'm not the guy for the job. I just work for the guy, that kind of thing.
And
So,
he's more like a soldier, like a warrior.
right, he's a soldier. Right, he's a soldier,
right.
But a super.
It's funny because I was just watching Netflix series about the Roman Empire. Actually, it's a good one for you.
Yeah.
And Julius Caesar was a warrior, a fighter, and also became, a government leader.
Yeah. And he probably, I don't know if he would have been able to develop that, but he had so many great storylines that he developed. And the best one, he created characters that resonate even today. So he created this character named US Agent. So the government had this commission, and they wanted him to to join this commission and to do something that he didn't feel was right. And so he said no, and he gave his uniform back, and they hired this guy named Johnny Walker, and he was US Agent, and he was a yes man, and he would do what the government said, and he would wear the uniform. But they redesigned the US Agent uniform, but it still was very patriotic looking. But he did whatever the government wanted, and that really, I mean, that Steve Rogers is the Captain America super identity name, and that didn't sit very well with Steve Rogers. So they had there was the series that came out in 2019, Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and that's all about US Agent. And US Agent actually winds up getting more strength from this character that Mark created called Power Broker. So he goes to the Power Broker, and he's getting stronger and stronger and stronger, and he's kind of like buying
stronger financially,
physically.
Oh, okay.
So he's going to the Power Broker, and he's getting stronger and stronger, and he's got this. And then there's a character he created named Flag Smasher. So Flag Smasher is, these characters were not created January 6th. They were created in the 80s. So they had to go back to this dead guy to get a story that was relevant for the series, because it's hard to write about Trump. It's hard to create a character that's named Donald Trump and make it, and the people aren't turned off and polarized. So I'm so glad that it was a commission that was the wing of the government in the 80s, and then he he blindly followed it. US Agent followed it, but then as it developed, Cap just couldn't take it anymore, so he stepped back in and he confronted him with it, and it was a real showdown. So there's a cover where it's US Agent and Captain America, and he just built it to the fact that finally Cap says, I can't take this anymore, I got to go back to work, and I got to take my job back. And then US Agent didn't want to give it back to him, and the government it was a very interesting storyline, extremely interesting storyline. And
you consider that one of the best?
Yeah, the fans loved it, and the fans.
So list, can you share a list of the 3 or 5 best stories that you consider?
Well, Fighting Chance was definitely one of them. His other character that he wrote that he felt even more aligned with was Quasar. So that was the cosmic aspect of Mark, as he loved the cosmos, he loved the universe, he loved the principles of what the divine, what the I mean, I don't even know.
And you told me one time that he was not only an artist, but he was also a researcher. He used to research science,
Yes.
physics, politics,
Yeah.
everything, right?
He loved science. He loved evidence-based stuff, and he loved all the principles of the, and he had to know them in order to write, because it's like it's the principles that like gravity. You want to write
Like a science fiction writer, right?
right. He still has to have um a grasp of science so that it's practical science too. You can't drain a swimming pool in a minute. You can't pull the plug and the water goes down. You're going to put that into a story. You have to. It would be as much time as it takes to drain that pool, based on the principles of the gravity going down the drain with the water. So he had to know all those principles, but Quasar had these quantum bands, and I have this little Quasar character here, but he had these quantum bands, and see the bands
He
right there.
didn't get a movie of him yet.
No, not yet, but they're probably going to come out with, and definitely there's going to be a book written on Mark's love of Quasar, because he never felt like it caught on with the fans. And I think a lot of fans don't really want to think as much, like I was saying when we were talking about that show Emergence, that was the universe and your place in it. I think people go to the theater and they don't really want to think that much. They just want to be entertained and dance around, and it's like these were principles of the universe, gravity.
Well, I
light.
think there is a demand for that, but probably most people are really looking for the entertainment. Yeah.
Right. The entertainment value.
So Quasar is one, Special Agent is another. You said something about Red Skull?
Yeah, the Red Skull was a great villain, but a really great villain that he created was Crossbones. So Crossbones was
Crossbones.
another character that he created with Kieran Dwyer, and it was, I mean, that Captain America movie had Crossbones in it really did well, because the good part of a hero is that part of his personality that's reflected in the villain. So creating a really good villain is really difficult too, because you have to take all of the touch points and Achilles heels of the superhero and then create a villain that, just like Joker with Batman.
So in Carl Jung terms,
yes,
the villain will represent the hero's shadows.
Yep.
Something like that.
Yep.
Okay.
Exactly. The dark part of him that loomed in the background, but it suddenly manifested itself in this villain. So
because he had that negative aspect in his own self, then it would be more difficult for him to fight with the hero, or maybe have more compassion to the hero, something like that.
And that's why I think people love these characters, because they represent these archetypal God,
right.
And
mythology,
and all that, and philosophy, and it's all in comics. It's not wham pam pow. This is the thinking man's comic.
Is the mythology what mythology was for the Greeks?
Yep.
Cartoons are for our current day and age.
I think so.
So Red Skull and Crossbones, what do they symbolize or represent?
Evil. Evil and no conscience, and ego. And there's like the 7 levels of consciousness, and they're the control, the authoritarian, the mean, the nasty, all those things that are in the basic.
And what were the difference between Red Skull and Crossbones? Why they were 2 instead of 1?
Oh, there's a lot of bones in both of them. There's a skull, and then the other one's the crossbones. So it's almost like he really loved skeletons. He loves skeletons. They make really great villains, and
they represent that too. That
right. And I'm not. I didn't really read comic books when I was growing up, and I I think it was because I wasn't that close with my brother, and he did. And most girls get pulled into comic books because their brothers were reading them and they introduced their sisters to them. But I didn't have that relationship with Robert. So I didn't, I went more into the fashion and sewing. And so I had my passions, but comics weren't really one of them. And I think that my parents' generation, I just finished reading this book called The 10-Cent Plague. And
what is the name?
10-Cent Plague. So a comic book costs 10 cents. And it's like the very first thing that a kid can buy with his own money. And so there's that real association with I bought this for myself, and they love that it fueled their imagination. But Stan Lee had to deal with the fact that the comic book industry was considered, youth decay. It was, rotting the minds of youth, and they just saw these.
Like the image that video games have today.
Yeah, and that they had these scantily clad women with these big voluptuous breasts, and they were running around in tights, and so they probably thought that that it was ridiculous and that it was frivolous. And but then when Stan Lee hit on this formula and DC hit on the formula, and that the public gravitated towards it, nobody was buying those biblical pamphlets, and so they had to demonize the comic books. So they made them, don't let your children read these evil publications, it's rotting their minds. And Stan Lee actually lived through getting spat on. He had to go to like the House on Un-American Activities and say that this wasn't contributing to the demise of the younger generation, that far from it. This was, and that he had to state a case for it. So the fact that Stan came out of the army, went into writing comic books, it created the genre of comic books, basically. And he bought these little books that were cliffhangers when he was a kid. So all the comic books were cliffhangers because he was a great marketer. He knew how to keep people coming back and buying them. And so
that's Stan Lee.
That's Stan Lee. And so he, and he just, and his uncle would see what DC was doing and said, they just created the Justice League of America. You have to create something that's an answer to that. So Stan came up with Fantastic Four. So he would come. They were like,
so the Fantastic Four to counterbalance the DC League of Justice, right?
Yeah, but there was a time where, and my parents probably subscribed to that, like read a book, don't read a comic book. And that it was somehow, it somehow was not on par with the great American novel.
Classics.
And Stan Lee changed his name because he was Stanley Lieber, and he changed his name to Stan Lee because he didn't want to bastardize his own name by associating it with comics, because he was going to write the great American novel.
It was like comics was like a kind of a underground culture.
Yeah, and it caught on. It caught on. They were selling millions of these things.
What were the age at that time? What were the age of the readers and buyers of those comics?
Probably a good time to start was 8 or 9.
Wow.
And then into their teens. So between the ages of 8 and probably 20, and if it was, and see, that's the thing with Mark, is that he had good stories. If he captured your attention and your imagination when you were 8, you stayed with him. That's why people love him so much, because they grew up with him, and they understand the way he thinks and what he was trying to do, because he got into the psyche of the fans, because he was a fan himself. And
and especially with the action figures. I remember when I was a child, the action figures was like the instrument that we had, the boys had to exercise their imagination.
Exactly.
and the playfulness.
And then you would get the stories from what was in the comics, and then you would make those up. And he, I think he sparked that in a kid, and then they grew up with him, and he wrote Captain America 10 years. So you imagine somebody starts when they're 8, and they're still reading it when they're 18. So he was so loved, and that I think the fans knew what he was trying to do, because they stuck with it every single week, and they would read it religiously. And this guy Jason Olsen wrote a book called The Star-Spangled Symbolism of Captain America. Mark Grunewald and the Star-Spangled Symbolism of
You do
Captain.
have that book there at hand?
No, I don't. I
Okay.
read it, and it's in.
So what is the name again?
It's called Mark Grunewald and the Star-Spangled Symbolism of Captain America, 1985 to 1995. And the first sentence in the book is, when Mark Grunewald died, it left a giant hole in the comic book industry. So the fact that Jason was a professor now at the University of Utah and wrote this book about what Mark did, and I saw it on advertised, and I called him and I said, "Hi, I'm his widow, and I read your book and it was great, but why didn't you call anybody to interview them?" And he said, "I didn't need to. I was a latchkey kid. My mom worked. I came home from school, and comics were exactly what I went to, and I read."
Comics were his parenting, basically.
Yep. And so he learned everything he needed to know about life through Mark's teachings embedded.
That's beautiful. Yeah, because the main difference between the comics at that time and now is because at that time there were some values, some morals, some role models that were very positive.
Messages.
And that was not all about special effects and
violence,
and fights and violence, and superficial things.
Nope.
I think what banalized this industry was going to the movies in a way, because of the language of the movies and everything, and all the addiction to special effects and everything.
And then you didn't have to read it. You didn't have to read it.
Right. It's the same thing of watching a movie based on a book. The book is much richer, and the same thing with comics. The comics is much richer than the movies. Yeah.
And the guys writing the script don't have Mark's background, so they don't have the continuity, and that's what's lacking now, because Mark called himself the custodian of the Marvel universe. He was the continuity cop. He would say, "You can't put that there. You can't do that with this character." And he created a Bible called the Official Handbook of the Marvel Universe. And it was the front, back, and side of all the characters, and a deep, intense, minuscule, minutia description of everything about that character. So he did that for 7,500 characters.
Oh, 70. Say that again.
It's the biggest literary backdrop that was ever created. Marvel Universe is the biggest literary backdrop against which all these stories would emerge from. And somebody had to keep track of it, because, you have 7 characters, destroyers are out there. You need one destroyer doing one thing right and the way he's supposed to be, acting. And so Mark was like, I want a manual. I want a manual that I leave behind that is how Marvel characters, what they're about, and you can reference it, and you can see what stories it could be, and what had happened to them in the past, what things they had gone through, and what air they breathed,
the background,
what their nickname was, everything down to the last detail. And the fans ate it up. Oh my God.
And he did that for how many characters again?
Well, there's over 7,500 in the Marvel universe, so
that's a lot.
Yeah,
that's a lot. 7,500.
Yeah, but they
7,000. I didn't even know there was so many.
I know a lot of people don't, but he didn't work on all those at once. He started with, and he did alphabetical, so it was all the A's, all the B's, all the C's, but you had to buy 6 at a time in a ring binder. and you would put them in a ring binder. So you would collect them, and he was, he probably made the most from anything he wrote from that official handbook, because that was like the fans
Bible.
gold.
Bible.
Yeah, they could not get enough of that description about those characters.
So it's like an X-ray of every superhero in the Marvel.
Yeah, and okay. They don't pay attention to that now when they're writing the scripts. These characters are pretty much making their own
flat. Yeah,
they're making their own reality about it, and it's right there. And they often said that Mark is sorely missed because there's just no continuity. They just don't pay attention to that. They don't value it, and it's a lot of work to do that.
but they have the structure, they have the money, they have the people, if they really wanted it.
If they really wanted to, if they really wanted to. But it takes effort, and you have to have somebody who can do research. Like Mark was a researcher, and he knew how to research things. Whenever I turned him on to anything, he would get excited about what he learned about that artist, and then he would go back and he would
and that was pre-internet.
pre-internet,
pre-chat GPT.
Yep, pre-AI, pre-everything. He researched it very, very diligently.
Where did he go? To the libraries?
Yeah, and ask friends. And there are record stores. There were there,
or even talk to scientists too. No,
lots of books,
or just books. Yeah,
I mean, he had a bazillion books, and he had a lot of comic books too. So he would constantly, he really knew how to research. Oh, he was just an incredible researcher. But he also would read the headlines. So he read the
news.
Yeah, so he would pull, because Marvel took everything from the headlines. He had to know what was happening, so he knew he had to be up on current events so that he could make Captain America relevant and keep him relevant. So
based on your experience and knowledge of Mark, what is the main difference between DC Comics and Marvel?
Well, there's no real continuity with DC. That's definitely it. And then DC is not based in reality like Marvel is. Like I said, they're all fictitious places, fictitious presidents, fictitious characters that don't anchor themselves in reality. So
give a few examples, please. Give a few examples.
Well, Gotham City, so Bruce Wayne lives in Gotham City, and he does all of his work in Gotham City. That's a made-up place. That does not exist.
It feels like New Yorkish a little bit.
It does, but they don't name it that. They call it Gotham City. So that's one of the biggest things. And then now DC has more television, and Marvel has more movies. So there's been more television things created with these DC characters. But that's, as far as I can. I mean, I'm no comic book scholar. That's why I love having his fans as my producers and as my foils, and I can take them to all these things and have them on panels, so I can tell stories about Mark as the man, as the person I was.
Let's focus on that too. So I'm interested in knowing what made Mark be who he was. Who was Mark from a child to Mark as a Captain America writer at Marvel?
Right.
Like what happened?
I think I said I likened it to, he was the perfect. His parents were 18 when they had him. Both of them were 18. That's very young. And they had this brainiac kid, and his father was a complete fan of comics. And so
really?
he was able to.
And that was what year that Mark was born?
in 1953.
Okay.
So his dad's 18.
Post-war.
Yeah, post-war. Oshkosh, Wisconsin, white picket fence, idyllic upbringing.
Jewish?
PTA. No,
Jewish?
it was
No Jewish?
Lutheran, mostly
Lutheran. Okay.
Christian.
Stan Lee is Jewish, right?
Jewish, yeah, and that was more New York. The New York kids were Lower East Side immigrants. Parents came over from Ellis Island. Came over.
So Mark was born in Wisconsin.
He was born in Wisconsin. His parents were German, and his mom lived on a farm. And Wisconsin was cheese and farms and very idyllic and very pastoral. And the city was not hustle and bustle like New York at all. He was born in a time when he was a Boy Scout. He was his father was a troop leader. So he went to the drive-ins. His mother had they had sleepovers with the kids in the neighborhood. He organized all the kids in the neighborhood. This is a painting of the.
Oh, I cannot see. You have to bring that to the camera.
This is a painting of his neighbor, and it's Mark as Superman, and there's no latex in those days. And that's his friend in the neighborhood he made Batman. So this is like early cosplay.
Right.
These kids,
yeah.
And they
he was still into DC. There was no Marvel yet.
No, and this is Justice League of America, and
so his friend
that cape was his mother's tablecloth.
Oh, he painted this. His friend.
She probably made him the outfit, but there was no latex.
Oh, is this a photo or a painting?
It's a painting of a photo. So his friend did this as it's a giant painting. This is a copy of this giant painting that's a 4 feet by 3 feet. I mean, it's big. And
so he was born in a period that the United States was going through a huge economic boom.
Yep, boom. The suburbs happened. Everyone had jobs.
Middle class or high class?
Middle class.
Middle class.
But they didn't. Nobody was they weren't trying to outdo each other like they do now. They were like the whole you could go to a neighbor and the neighbor could they would feed you, and you would know all your neighbors. The PTA, the Boy Scouts, all that was happening in the schools where some of the best schools happened in the 60s in the United States. And we loved our teachers, and our teachers knew each one of us individually, knew our families, and knew
you were not a number.
No, we're not a number at all. And they also got everybody into the arts. They believed in the arts. You had to start playing an instrument. You had to be in a play. You had to get up on stage. You had to paint. You had to dance. You had to sing. I mean, all of the different disciplines. And I hearken back to that time in my life, and Mark does too, where it's like our imaginations were fueled. We had, if I wanted to sew, my mother got me a machine, she would buy material, she'd sew with me. We were looking for projects to do, and Mark was the same way. So his parents were 18. My parents were in their 40s, so I was like more than
wow, because you were
because I was the last one.
He was the last Mark's one, and he was the first one.
And they're 18 years old. I mean, God, they're teenagers.
Siblings? He had siblings. Yeah, he had siblings.
Yeah, and his sister is like 2 years younger than he is. That kind of thing. So she's not all that different in age, and it was just so idyllic. And I think of Mark like it was like Wisconsin was like a petri dish, and his parents were, his dad was the petri dish, his mother was the substrate, and Mark was this microorganism that was growing on this petri dish. He was like a cultural explosion, and he just threw himself completely into the family was very important in those days. He wasn't terribly religious, but he did go to church, and he was always a thinker.
Did he believe in God or some higher?
I think so, but then I have a feeling that at the when I met him, he wouldn't say that he was an atheist, but he was more of an agnostic, and he definitely was spiritual, not religious, because he felt as though mankind tried to put this universe into a box, and tried to put restrictions on it, and he just didn't like
to control
religion.
everything, right?
Yeah, he didn't like religion. He understood it very well, but it was so ironic that the church knew he was a great painter. He had a studio in town. It was probably $100 for a studio.
Painting oil.
Yeah, painting. He was a great illustrator. Not as great as the comic book guys were. That's
and
why.
How did he learn that? How did he learn that? Did he has a mentor?
He just had a natural talent, and he developed it. I think he had an inner sense about how to develop things and how to go about learning.
Like self-learning.
His parents did not send him. He went to art school. He did go to art school when he was in college, but by that time he had schooled himself, and
what was his major in college?
It was art and English. Yeah, so he and his friend Chuck, they had art studios, and they just explored the creative imagination to the nth degree. And he
kind of paintings, more abstract, more
realistic. It was some abstract, but it was more life, more life scenarios. His
human figures too, or
human
objects?
Figures. Yeah, he always would do references and use a lot of his friends in his paintings, but he had and he did all of the newsletters and things like that for the church, and he created this character named Augmento, which is a giant musical clef on his chest, and he was very it was funny because he got hired to do this painting of Jesus Christ for his church. So he wanted to make sure that he was referential, and he got Chuck they built a cross, and it was and they went down to the river, and they put the cross up, and they hung him on the cross. They tied him on the Chuck took pictures. No, they Mark. And so
Mark was on the cross.
Yeah, so and he had the beard and the long hair, and he had a diaper on, and so Chuck was.
Why did they do that? I didn't.
Why? Because he was referential. He wanted to something, and he knew that he would. It was kind of ironic that he'd make himself Jesus Christ.
Oh, wait. So he was bored of painting Jesus Christ for the church, but then he did this ritual.
He did it his way. He got hired to do this painting of Jesus Christ on the cross, and so he made himself the referential Jesus, and he hung himself on the cross. He took pictures of himself.
How did he hang them himself?
With rope. And he was very, very athletic, so he did not mind heights. He was, he was up there on the cross.
That was 20 feet off the cross. What?
Yeah, a real cross. And so the police came by, and they were like, "What is this guy hanging on this cross?" And so
Chuck said, "It's
for an art project."
Right.
For an art project. So they were like, "Okay." And he wasn't nude; he had a diaper on. So they let him. He was just about finished with taking the pictures of it. But to this day, he took me to the church, and there's a huge painting that he did that's a triptych, and each one of these paintings is probably 6 feet by 3 feet.
Oh my God, where are those paintings?
It's in the church.
Some fans would love to see that. What church and where?
It's in a Lutheran church in Wisconsin. Yep.
You know the name of the
Lutheran
church?
Yep. And he's hanging there. I need to tell the library that that painting is in the church. Thanks for reminding me. Because we
You're
do a
welcome.
comic book contest challenge in Oshkosh. They made September 28th Mark Grunewald Day. So we do a
That's
comic
the
book
day
challenge.
that he passed.
Yeah, that's
September
when
20 what?
September 28th
28.
is
Okay.
Mark Grunewald Day.
Okay.
Yeah, so but leading up to that,
Who created that? Marvel? Marvel created that?
No, the town, the pizza parlor, the comic book store, the aviation
Oh, his
museum,
hometown.
his hometown, the library. They all got together and they created this Mark Grunewald comic book contest challenge. So
What is the name of the town in
it's
Wisconsin?
Oshkosh.
Oshkosh?
Oshkosh.
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 Oh, okay.
It really
Never heard.
exists.
Okay.
It's like elephant's breath, Wisconsin or something. It truly exists. Oshkosh Bagosh truly exists, and it's everything you
Okay.
would think.
So
yeah,
let's go back. So he's a child, went to school, do some art, then start painting for the church. Let's continue from there to Marvel and to how it ended in Marvel. How
yeah,
let's go to that line of timeline.
Yeah, he came to New York off and on, but then he moved after he graduated. He graduated in 75, and then he moved to New York in 77, something like that. But he was constantly trying to get work in the industry. But his father and he created this treatise on comic reality. So his dad was a heavy duty thinker, and you can
Mark's
imagine
dad.
Mark and his dad creating this fictional reality. So they called it fictional reality. And they did flow charts and comparing Earth One and systems and all of, you can imagine how geeky, nerdy it was with his dad. And
so that was based on physics,
physics, and also
astronomy,
and also characters, because his dad was reading comics, and so they treated everything in comic books like it was fictional reality. So
but they were actually creating comic books.
They read them, and they did a lot of treatises on what they read. So Mark was there. I mean, he was like the Buckminster Fuller, C.P. Snow, those kind of thinkers. And so he and his dad, I can just imagine them just having such a great academic son father. It's absolutely almost idyllic. That's why I said.
And his dad was also almost like a co-worker, because only 18 years older than him, right?
And he was a teacher. So his father was one of the best teachers that Wisconsin, ever had. He actually also created a contract. If you wanted to be in his class, you had to contract for an A, a B, or a C. And this is what you needed to do to get an A. This is what you needed to do to get a B. This is what you needed to do to get a C. And you could upgrade your contract.
Very
but
transparent.
You had to do the work. You had to do the work. So that's why Mark created.
He was a teacher of what
high school
discipline?
High school.
About like math?
Probably English teacher. But in those days, I think they taught multiple subjects.
Yeah, it's like even today.
Right. So they created this whole treatise of comic reality that was so. It was a
that became the soul of Marvel then, huh?
It was a definite precursor to the official handbook. Definite precursor. And a definite precursor to Mark's role in Marvel as the continuity cop, because he could keep track of things. He knew how to he knew how to chronicle and archive, and he was a systems thinker. He was a definite systems
Okay,
thinker.
so we are talking now, he and his father doing this comic treatise. How old were he?
20.
How old was he?
20.
20. Okay. Still didn't meet
Dad
Stan
was
Lee yet.
probably 38
Didn't
at the time.
haven't met Stan Lee yet.
No, but
Okay.
he wrote letters to the editor and told Stan, you know, they always had this bullpen page, this Marvel letters to the editors page, and he wrote a letter to Stan, and it got published, and he said, "Oh my God, I knew I was going to write when I saw my letter in that letter page. I knew that I was going to be a comic
My path,
artist."
yeah.
It was just
so at that time he was 20. So we're talking
no, he was a
about
kid. He was a kid when he wrote that letter.
Oh,
He
really?
was probably 12 years old, 11
Really?
years old, you know. But that's why he always answered all of his fan mail, because Stan Lee answered his mail and answered his fan letter, and he
That's
knew how
huge.
important it
That's
was.
huge.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
he
I
would,
have an experience with that. Some of my heroes actually responded my letters.
right? You're like,
Yeah,
my God,
it's
they know who I
huge. It's
am.
like, well, I exist, you know.
And then you
Yeah,
wind
and
up,
it's so humble from them, right?
yeah, and you wind up working for him.
Yeah, or doing what they
He
do, you know.
becomes your boss, and he knows your name. I mean, it doesn't get,
Yeah.
you know, Mark
Okay,
had that
so
real
when Mark was working with his father, still didn't meet Stan Lee. How old were Marvel at that time that he was? How old the Marvel was?
probably 20 some years.
But
20,
still small.
yeah. But they started out as Timely Comics, you know, in
Can you
the
tell us a little bit of how Stan Lee started and how that intersected with Mark?
yeah. I mean, he was a he's a kid from the Bronx, and he went to DeWitt Clinton High School. A lot
Stan
of
Lee.
famous people who went into the comic business for some reason went to DeWitt Clinton, and he
Went where?
DeWitt Clinton High School in the Bronx. So he's this Jewish kid from the Bronx. He goes to this school.
Parents came to United States
Yep,
before the Second
the
War.
whole bit, and so everybody got drafted. So he went into the army, and when you were in the army, you had to do various things besides be a soldier and fight. You would do things like write, you know, news items, or so he was the writer. He was a writer in the military, and
So
he
he
was
was
always a
more like
writer.
an intelligence
Yeah,
role, or more like a soldier role?
I don't really, I don't know, but I know that there were a lot of, you know, like they did broadcasts, so people would, you know, when it was their own, they didn't get outside people. All the military had
And
to
then did he go to
write.
the war? Did he go to the war,
And
or he was
yeah,
just?
and I don't think he went to the war. He was doing those kind of things. So
Okay,
it's almost like Sid Caesar,
like office stuff.
office kind of things. Yeah.
Okay.
And then when the war ended, he was looking for work, and so he went to work for his uncle, who worked for Timely Comics. And
Timely Comics.
yeah. So he worked for his uncle. You know, he was and you know, he showed a lot of promise, and he would write stories, mostly DC is Detective Comics. So DC is actually stands for Detective Comics.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Very
So they wrote detective
people might know
stories.
that. Very
Yeah.
few people may know that.
Right. They wrote detective stories, and
It's like Sherlock Holmes kind of thing.
Yep, those kind of things. They're very, very fiction based. Not superheroes so much as you know, just drawn
You mean fiction or reality based?
and reality based.
Reality based. Okay,
Right.
yeah, because
Then
detective. Yeah.
he started thinking about archetypal, heroic type of people, you know, kind of characters. And he started to create things like Spider-Man and Superman, and you know, those. He didn't create Superman.
Was he influenced by Joseph Campbell, as
Yeah.
many other?
Yeah, yeah. Not as much as Mark was. I think he read a lot, and he was a great thinker and a philosopher, and he was in this hack field. He
What
was
is
in the
Hackfield?
hack is like you just churning it out. You're churning out story after story after story. You have deadlines,
Right,
and
right.
you get the
Grinding.
books out. Yeah, just get the books out on the newsstands, and
Just about numbers, not so much
yep,
quality.
yep. You just have to make the bottom line. Right, 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 right. But then he just, he started to create these characters like, comic book characters like Spider-Man. Imagine thinking up Spider-Man, but
Did
he was
Spider-Man
fascinated.
started as a detective or something?
No, he was uh, a young kid, Peter Parker. He got bit by a spider. And
Okay,
it was
so at that point,
radioactive.
Timely Comics were already transitioning from detective stories to
Yeah, to
superhero. Got it.
what they were started to create as superheroes, and they weren't really even call them superheroes then. It was
And
just like
what DC was doing at that moment in time?
they were doing same kind of thing. Superman, they were, and I think there's some cosmic warehouse they were all tapped into for
So
some
Stan
reason.
Lee was actually also looking at DC at the same time, right?
No,
No, he didn't take
he
that as
was
a reference.
timely, and some there were other. I mean, there are plenty of books on the subject, that chronicle the timeline of DC coming up and Marvel coming up. But suffice it to say, by the time the 60s rolled around, there were all these characters that Mark was reading, and that Stan and Jack Kirby, Joe Simon, all these guys got together, and they all worked together, and it was kind of like they created this uh, backstory that they had this really cool job, writing these characters. And the kids, like I said, it was the first thing that you could buy with your own money. So, and people like the artwork, and they were cheap. It was cheap, and they used to call it birdcage fodder. So you'd read it, and then it became, fodder for the birdcage. You just put it in the bottom of the birdcage. That's why a number one Spider-Man is worth $1 million, because there's only two of them out there because everybody threw them away.
Is that really the price? Really?
Yeah, I mean it's hundreds of thousands of dollars that these comic books are now, and that's because they're rare. And it's like Mark said, there's no way anything printed in the 80s is ever going to match that kind of inflation that those comics that are from the 60s. And and it's even better if it's in mint condition, if you never read it, if you left it in the wrapper and the staples aren't rusted, it's even more expensive. And there's a thing called the Overstreet Price Guide, and you consult that. It's like a Kelly's Blue Book, like what the value is of things. And the old comics from the 60s are hundreds and thousands of dollars. Hundreds and thousands.
So, okay, so let's go back
So
to the
that's
timeline here. So, Stan Lee's starting to create the superheroes with his uncle, and Mark was just like a reader at that point,
yeah, he was a
a
reader,
fan.
and all the kids in the neighborhood were readers. They all got into comic books, and his dad introduced him to him, and his dad used to get his comic books, and they would read them together, and it just it's just,
Wow,
and Stan
that's a
knew, he read these little books that were cliffhanger books, and he would wait for the next one to come out, and he said, that's what I'm going to do with the comic book. So each
You're
a
talking about Mark
story
or
ended.
Stan now? You're talking about Stan or Mark?
Yeah, that each he knew about that cliffhanger thing. Cliffhanger is when you
He
leave something
who? I lost
unresolved.
you. He who? Mark or Stan?
Stan
Okay, Stan.
read this
Okay.
book that was a cliffhanger little book as a kid, and he had to wait for the next printing for him to find out what happened to the hero. what happened in the story. And so he took that principle and he made it to be what comic books were about. So kept you buying the next issue, the next issue, and the next issue.
Did they
And
also publish in newspapers too, or it was just comic books?
there were syndicated columns eventually, but for the most part, it was comic books. And then there are newspapers, but they had their own strips. They had Brenda Starr. They had they had different characters that weren't necessarily syndicated at that time. So they had comic books, but all the kids were reading them. All the kids were glued every week to when they were coming, and they collected them and traded them, and then wrote into letters to the editor and complained about this plot and complained about that character and complained, and just telling them how to write things and looking for
how did Mark took those advices or criticisms or suggestions? How did he take that?
Oh, he loved it. I mean, he just, I mean, he really, there's the word grok. He grokked with Stan. He was such a fan of Stan and that whole industry. Julie Schwartz, all the creators of all those characters.
So they exchanged correspondence before he worked with Stan.
He wrote letters to the editors. He didn't know them personally, but he felt he did, because they created this subculture of being so cool in the office. Wasn't it a fun place to work? Meanwhile, it's a freaking closet that they're sharing. These really? 2 guys or 3 guys are
it's not like a social media company nowadays.
They made it feel like it was the coolest, fraternity, to belong to. And
but it was a little room.
Yeah, it was just a little room. And that's why when Mark went to Marvel, he created Stan times 10. So he made it cool. He did a column called Mark's Remarks, and he commented on what he was thinking about, what things had happened in the office, what things were happening, that were cool. And he just painted that whole thing. And it was really a cool place to work because Mark made it so. Imagine.
So made it architecturally speaking.
Right. He made it so cool. And Jim Shooter was the editor-in-chief when he hired Mark. And Mark had created that fictional reality magazine with his dad, and he did an omniverse, which he called he basically created the multiverse. He created the omniverse.
So let's go back a little bit. I want to ask you, how did Mark get that job? Let's not jump to.
Yep. So he graduates college. He knows he wants to work in the industry. And he also, knows that he's got this magazine that he treated himself like he was a publisher. So he went to all of his friends who are equally as nerdy.
The magazine that he did with his father.
Yeah.
Got it.
So the magazine he did with his father morphed into Omniverse, the Journal of Fictional Reality.
Omniverse. Wow, it's Omniverse. A very up-to-date word.
I know.
And NVIDIA.
Exactly. And he was exploring all these different, and it was probably about 10 articles that were one more incredibly intense than the other. I mean, it was like
what were they about? Those Omniverse. What were they about? The Omniverse.
They were about peripheral subjects that weren't covered in the comics but were springboarded out of it, and how what were the 4 corners of the earth, and how Ragnarok, Asgard, and the whole mythology, Norse gods, played into Thor. It was just like, okay, we've got these mythological characters. Now we're going to go back and look at the history
of their origins.
You
know what it reminds me? It reminds me Tolkien with Lord of the Rings.
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. And they were all reading all those and reading, the whole and the Star Wars came out, and it was all, Joseph Campbell, and he was so plugged into all that, and so he had 2 issues. He had I think 2 issues of Omniverse. So figure 2 magazines that he had printed himself and had subscriptions to. And he had that in his portfolio, plus some artwork.
Wow.
And he was going around, and he.
How did he print them? In color?
In probably at a mimeograph machine.
Oh, black and white.
It wasn't even a Xerox machine in those days like that. It was like.
And who funded? His father funded that? His father?
Yeah. And it was like $1 or something to subscribe, but it was and it was all written in, and there was no computers. I mean, it was all Courier. The typeface was, he typed
Manual.
it up, and then he wrote this article on personal entropy. A 27-page, 23-year-old wrote this article on personal entropy. So entropy was something he was fascinated about. So then he took it personally, and how
entropy is the tendency to destruction, right?
Exactly. And so he made,
if you don't do anything, it tends to decay.
It tends to go back to inert, and tends to reverse itself,
disintegrate. Yeah.
And also entropy is like you put sugar in water and it dissolves. That's entropy too. So but he wrote this treatise on.
It's like chaos, right? Something like chaos.
Yeah. And he was just such a thinker. So he's got these different auditions and different interviews. He came to New York, and he worked for Citibank. He worked for a bank for about a year, and he was trying to get into the
as industry. A teller.
Yeah,
as a teller.
As a, I don't know, the back office type.
Yeah, it's like an aspiring actor in LA, and
he got
working as a waiter. But he was in New York. He worked as a bank.
He went to the bank. He
that makes sense.
Didn't want to kill himself waiting tables. But he was shopping.
He was more like a brain guy than a body guy, right?
Yeah, and he's shopping his work around to all of the comic book offices, and he heard about that Marvel, that this editor-in-chief needed an assistant.
Marvel existed at that time.
Yeah,
the Timely Comics already had become Marvel.
Yep, already had.
Did he knock the door of DC? Did he knock the door?
He tried to get in there, and Julie Schwartz was very dismissive of him. I talked to his best friend, and they came to all the Comic Cons, which were very small in those days, but they met each other. They were all nerds, and they all met at these Comic Cons, and it was like a convention. And they all exchanged stories, and he got to be very, very good friends with this guy, Dave Loffers. And Dave is still around today, and I'm going to be working on some things with him about Mark.
David is from DC?
No, Dave's in Florida, but he never worked in the comic.
He's from DC Comics? No?
He was just a fan, but he was Mark's confidant. Because he was such a fan, he had nothing to gain by any sales or anything. He was purely critiquing it, and that's what Mark needed.
So we were talking about Mark looking for a job. So he knocked the door at DC, and he was dismissed.
Working at a bank.
The people in DC didn't want anything with him. They were not impressed.
1977, 1978, that kind of thing. He was just looking for a job. So Schuller sees this whole fictional reality magazine.
Who is Schuller?
Schuller was the editor-in-chief, Jim Schuller. And he's looking for an assistant. And so he's
Marvel.
Marvel.
Okay.
So he got a job there. And he was Jim Shooter's personal, assistant editor. And Jim just said, I didn't have to tell Mark anything. He was his own wind-up toy, because he knew Jim Shooter was writing comics. He was from Pittsburgh too. He was writing comics at 13 and sending stories in. They didn't have any idea how old he was. So Shooter had the same kind of love of comics that Mark did. He just did not have anywhere near the compendium of knowledge that Mark had about the comic books. He had
and where does Stan Lee fits in this story?
so
Stan Lee is also a partner of.
Stan was not the editor-in-chief, he was the president. So he had his name above all the titles. Stan Lee presents Superman. I mean, Spider-Man. Stan Lee presents Iron Man. Stan Lee presents the Green Lantern. So his name.
And this guy that hired Mark was
the editor-in-chief.
Stan Lee. Okay, editor-in-chief.
Yeah, so Stan was his immediate boss.
Got it.
But on the
so Mark was two people from Stan at that. Okay, got it.
Yeah, I mean, not really. He was the assistant editor of the assistant editor, who was like the editor-in-chief's assistant, so he was pretty lowly, but he proved himself very quickly, and he got a lot of promotions. He became he worked on lots of books. He got assignments. You get assignments when you're in the publishing business. You get assignments. You get, can you try your hand at this? Try your hand at that. Yeah, try your hand
like
at
experimental projects, you'd say.
Right, experimental projects.
Okay, got it.
And he came with he proved himself to be an idea man. So he, would always go in with a great idea for something that Marvel needed to publish, and it always sold. And what he did really, really most important was he created this whole culture in the office. The office culture was so amazing because Mark was at the helm. He was the prankster. He just wanted people to love comics as much as he did and want to show up to work. So he made the office fun. He was,
you know what he reminds me? I watched a documentary about Walt Disney.
Yes.
It's kind of a Walt Disney figure, right?
Exactly. And you're in a creative profession. You want people. I mean, at the same time, the good news is you work for a comic book company. The bad news is you work for a comic book company because you are on deadlines. Deadlines. He said, if I heard one more, my dog ate my story or my grandfather died, excuses, excuses, excuses. So he took it on himself. Like his father created the manual and the contract of what you needed to do for an A, B, and C. He created the assistant editor workshop. Monday morning, you had to take a class on how to write the Marvel way. And
very strong work ethics.
Yep. And he created a manual. And every week, Monday morning, they would sit and they would talk about how to write comics. So he created this comic book course masterclass that people all took and graduated from. And there are people in the industry today saying, I have my job and I do it well because I studied under Mark Grunewald. So they appreciate the fact that, and he took that on himself. He didn't need to do that. That wasn't in his job description. He thought it up because he saw his father do that. And he saw
the need to do that.
And he saw the need to write a manual, to write a workbook on how, because at that time it was so loosey-goosey. I mean, they didn't even have vouchers. I mean, the whole comic book thing was just.
What is vouchers?
Vouchers is like if you do something, if you work, 3 or 4 extra hours, you fill out a voucher. So a voucher is
like extra
time card. Yeah, like
got it.
A timesheet. You have to turn in timesheets, and nobody had ever done that.
What we call today overtime.
Right, or overtime, or just a timesheet. How you spent your time, how you spent your time.
Yeah,
and so
some structure. Yeah.
Yeah. So Schuller tried to institute this into the Marvel way and give everyone these vouchers. And I mean, these old codgers did not want to go along with this. I mean, he was Schuller was young then too. But somebody had to do it, and somebody had to put some structure in there. And Mark appreciated, being a systems thinker, appreciated that you needed those systems. So he enforced them. He enforced them. He didn't buck up against, oh, we don't need vouchers.
It's a great balance between the flexibility of art, the creativity, and the structure and the rationale.
He was totally right brain, left brain. Balance. I mean, he really appreciated the systems, the facts and the figures and all that. But then he was total creative too. So he was completely balanced in that respect. I mean, I appreciate.
How about financially? Was he paid what he wanted, like, or he felt? Yeah.
I mean, think about it. These people would have done this job for free because it was a hobby. But and when they made it their life's work, they could get paid. And that's why when I met him, he was making 6 figures as an artist.
This was in the 80s.
In the 80s.
That would be how much now?
No, it was probably $500,000 now. You know, it was a really good salary. I mean, he was paid about $125,000 to be the senior, because he went up the ranks, and he got to be underneath the editor-in-chief. Schuller quit. No, quit. He was fired. And Tom DeFalco took over, and those two were really peas in a pod. They were such a great team. And
so say the name again.
Tom DeFalco.
Tom DeFalco and Mark Grunewald.
Right. They were.
Where is Stan Lee in this picture? He's like in the Ivory Tower, or he's still participating?
He's out in California, trying
more like in a managerial position.
He's trying to sell Marvel as, trying to keep it afloat. Trying to.
He's doing his role as a lead, but was he part of the creative process at the point, or no more?
He still would work on things. He still, because he
is he alive?
He was such a whiz. I mean, he could do.
Is he still alive? Sorry for my ignorance.
No.
When did he pass?
Died like 2018, something like that. 20.
Okay, yeah, it was
like
not such a long ago,
like
not such a long. Much later than Mark.
Yeah, much later than Mark. Yes, much later than Mark. He lived probably 50 years longer than Mark did.
Okay, so Mark achieved this position there, and what happened after? What happened?
So he assigned different. He got to know everybody. He knew everybody's strengths. He had them in his class. They all were. Schuller had a way of hiring people who were really comic book guys, who really were fans, and who knew the work, had the talent to create the work, and were great artists as well as writers. And
it's very similar to the video game industry. The video game industry ended up hiring people that were like really fans and lovers of video games.
Absolutely. And they had to prove it, and it was so easy to but it was funny because Mark had the dubious honor of taking people who were, I don't know, there's Jack Morelli was working on the docks. He was, he just came in and they were hiring, and he just signed up for it, and Mark trained him. Mark trained a lot of people, and
like from the scratch.
Right.
From the scratch.
And he read comics as a kid, but he didn't know how to do it. And Mark taught people, and so
he trained them to write and draw, or just draw, or just write,
and then find out what they were really good at. Jack wound up becoming a letterer. The comic book letters, they do those all by hand. So he became a comic book editor. Jack Morelli became a comic book editor, from working on the docks to coming to Marvel. But Mark had this way of bringing you in and making you do things you never knew you could possibly even fathom doing.
So he could see the potential of the person that not even the person knew.
and didn't even know. He
That's a
would
really
do that for
gift.
me. He would just tell me to do something, and I'm like, I don't know how to do that. And he said, well, you'll figure it out, and I'll check on you, and and so I did it because I didn't want to let him down.
So, Catherine, what do you think Mark saw in you when he married you? Did he ever say that to you?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. He said that I was smart enough to know how to deal with somebody like him, and I said I know what Mrs. Beethoven must have gone through, because I gave him complete freedom to do anything he needed to do to feed that. He said I'm compulsed. He had a compulsion to do comics, and I appreciate when someone has a passion and finds a passion in life that they're good at, and they can he was completely, he wasn't happy all the time, but he was contented and fulfilled. He was just missing a good relationship, and that's what I provided with him, because I was envious of his work life. I was envious. Imagine going to work every single day and get
It's
paid.
not work, it's just fun, right?
Right, to do the most incredible dream job that you can imagine. It was work, but it was something that was not in, it was
He was
completely in his
literally
wheelhouse.
following his heart and his passion, right?
Exactly. And
And then you let him fly and do that. This is a very good advice for many partners of artists,
right,
musicians, painters,
right. You're not going to change them.
graphic
You're not going to
designers.
change them. And I had my own career by that time. So I knew how to quote unquote, take myself away from what he was doing. And plenty of times he would run ideas past me or whatever. And I would say, well, that doesn't make any sense, because psychologically he would want to do that. You can add your 2 cents in. And he appreciated that. But for the most part, he was.
What was your profession at that time?
I was I was in the fashion business, so I was
Which you still are.
yes, exactly. But I was still just, I was modeling, and then I was an actress, and I had I had the comedy group in '88, quit. So I was basically just acting and modeling. And
Yeah, I saw a photo of you in the 80s. You really look like a top model.
yeah, I was
Right?
working for Ford. I got signed with Ford, and I was and I always wanted to, and I was an activist in my mind too, so I knew that comedy had to make a social statement. So I had a group called the Nerve. So the Nerve was a comedy group, but it was topical. So we hit, and I was in charge of the costumes. So I went in. This was probably 1982 when I created it, when we created the Nerve, and everything was the Cure, the Replacements, the Smiths, and so I said the Nerve, and it was a double entendre, because it was like the nerve to have the nerve. And I was trying to study acting. My boyfriend was in Blondie, and then he went.
Blondie the singer?
Yeah, went Blondie the group, and he was
Oh,
one
the
of the,
group, yeah.
yeah, he was the drummer in that. And then he got into self-doubt, and there were a lot of drugs in the Lower East Side. And I said, Billy, I didn't bring you here to doubt yourself. You're a good drummer,
Oh, that's the boyfriend that you brought from Pennsylvania.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah, so Mark and I both kind of, well, I arrived sooner than Mark did, but he was coming to Comic Cons, and I was coming to, bring Billy to the music scene. But I just was shy.
So you met Mark at the Comic Con?
No.
Oh.
I met him through, it was probably like 1990, and they were going to, because I became a plus size model. So I tried to do the straight size thing, but they wanted me to get down like 60 pounds lighter. And I was like, no. I said, I'm not going to wreck my health for some corporate, reason that I have to fulfill. And
that was not your natural body type.
That was not my natural. And I said, why can't we have different standards of beauty? I mean, I was like, asking these questions like there are 60, there's 60 million women who look more like me than a fashion model. Why can't we make it more reality based? So
like Marvel,
Yeah, right. So I was like, we could do this. We can do this. So I stuck with that because I realized, there's something to this. And then I became a plus size model, and then I created this. I was studying acting, and my acting teacher thought I was funny, and he wanted me to be his girlfriend. So we became girlfriend and boyfriend, and I started writing with him. I didn't know how to write comedy, but I knew what was funny, So we and in those days, it's like the punk rock. You just hung up a shingle, you show up, and you start performing, and then you write.
New York is the best place to do that. New York and LA, right?
And it was just a great playing field. And then I was in charge of the costumes. So I go to a thrift shop and I see nothing but business suits, and I was like, corporate America, you're going down. Because Wall Street was kind of that whole Gordon Gekko thing, and I knew that corporate America was up to no good. I knew that they wanted your soul, and that because I knew how to type. I took a business class in college, so when I moved to New York, I didn't wait tables. I went into offices, and I was a temp worker. So I worked temp in offices. So
how did you meet Mark? I think we got a little bit in a tangent here.
Yeah, so I was in hired by Ford Models, got a contract with them. I was big into plus modeling. I didn't do the comedy act much past 88. So I was still modeling and still working because the temp work, I got hired full-time, part-time at this law firm. So in the evening, after I was modeling, I would go to the law firm and work from 5:30 to midnight. So it was perfect, It was perfect. I didn't have to wait tables. I was, they were, it was a great.
So you met him at a law office?
No. So I was modeling, and they, the agencies get requests for different types of models. So Marvel put out a request for big women. They came to the plus agency and said, we need big women for She-Hulk.
How big you were? What was
big.
your
I was 5'10", and probably about a 12, 14. So I was not a size 4, so yeah, we were.
So big. You were big in relation to the model standards.
Exactly. But I wasn't beefed up. I wasn't, like She-Hulk, and they were looking for She-Hulk. And so we didn't have
like the counterpart of He-Man?
Right. So
are those Marvel? Are those guys Marvel?
She-Hulk is, yeah.
Oh, I didn't
know. Hulk and She-Hulk. Yeah, they always had
He-Man too? He-Man too?
He-Man, I don't know who He-Man is.
Oh, maybe Hulk. You mean She-Hulk or
She-Hulk? Like Hulk.
Okay, then that's my confusion. My confusion.
Hulk was the guy that he got big and angry. He would turn into
the Incredible Hulk.
Yes, the Incredible Hulk.
Oh, right.
Incredible Hulk.
The one they were looking for a female counterpart.
Female counterpart to that.
Okay, sorry, I didn't understand.
Right, and I wasn't beefed up.
Hulk was big in Brazil.
Absolutely, he was big, and so
Steve Banner, right?
Yeah, Steve Banner, and so She-Hulk. So I went up, and I did my best posing. I wore my best leotard, but Mark said,
"But you painted green."
No, didn't paint green, but I had to have the right body type. And he was like, no, I don't think the plus size industry is where we're going to catch these, because nobody was doing cosplay in those days. They hired models and hired actresses.
Nobody was doing cosplay.
Then nobody was dressing up.
What is cosplay? What is that?
Cosplay is costume play. You know how when you see Comic Cons now, all the people go in costume.
Yeah, even
That's
in
called
Kiss
cosplay.
concerts. Yeah,
That's called
yeah. I went to a
cosplay.
Kiss concert and everybody was
Yes,
wearing.
yeah, they're all dressed up like the characters. They didn't have that in those days, so they hired models to dress up as, you know, and hired them. But I didn't fit the bill, so he said that I would be better for the Enchantress.
Enchantress.
Enchantress, okay,
So he
that
had
sounds good.
another character in
Right?
mind
And I
already.
looked her up. I was like, dang, Enchantress, that was a compliment, you know. So you know, we talked a little, and you know, he 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 gave me his card, you know, and I just
Did you feel any spark at that moment? It was like some
I
kind
did,
of
because he had a comedy group, I had a comedy group, and he was just, it was a really cool place to work, you know. And I thought, this is what you do? You create comic books all day, you know? And he was like, yeah, and they pay me for it, you know. So I said, well,
pay
I
me
usually
good.
don't date people that I'm working with. And he goes, well, you don't have the job. So I I just, you know, I really liked him, and we started seeing each other, you know. So that was probably January, and
So
he
you didn't become the Enchantress?
no, no,
Oh, okay, okay, got it.
no, that was too obscure of a
So
character.
you got a
But if
even
you look at
better
my
role.
Instagram, I am Enchantress on Instagram. That's my alter
Okay.
my secret identity. My secret identity is I'm really Mrs. Captain America.
Can you share our Instagram so people
Yeah,
that are
it's
interested
Cat
in more about?
Schuller 111. Cat
Okay,
Schuller 111.
let's spell it. I can put that later in the description. But
CATSCHULLER, the number 11 111 111.
Cat
Cat
Schuller
Schuller 111.
111
Yeah,
at Cat Schuller 111.
yeah.
Right.
And
Got it.
then and so you'll see me as the Enchantress on my profile picture.
Okay. So you felt a spark with him, and did he feel a spark with you? Of course,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah, he did. Yeah. He did. And he was so funny because he's kind of nervous, you know, and
Shy?
I thought, oh, this guy's smitten. He really, you know, he's and
What is
um
smitten?
smitten means he was kind of taken by me. Taken by me, you know.
Oh, right, right,
And
right.
so
Like impressed by you.
yeah, we went to go out to lunch, and um I thought, you know, it was such a fascinating lunch. She told me that Revlon owned Marvel, and I was like, Revlon? My God. I know. That's like
What? He told what? Revlon what?
Revlon owned Marvel at the time.
Oh, at that time.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So it was
Revlon is big in the fashion industry, right?
exactly. And I'm like, the fashion world
Wow.
is supporting comics. And he said, yeah, it's a 17, I don't know, it's a $17 billion business that nobody knows about, you know. So I was like,
And
yeah,
that was
everybody has a
before the
comic.
movie industry came.
Exactly. Now it's a
17 billion in the 80s, before the
right,
movies.
right.
Imagine now.
Now it's
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 ridiculous. Yeah.
and one movie makes $1 billion. So it was a very small underground, but everybody had a comic, so that's why it was still very popular. And he was writing, you know, I had no idea how famous he was. I
And
didn't
now
know.
that you said that the Incredible Hulk, I remember Incredible Hulk as a TV series in Brazil.
Yes, yes,
So
yep,
Marvel got also into the TV,
yep, yep.
like DC
They
too, right?
licensed it. Yeah, yeah.
Maybe that's why they worked so much. It was not only comics at that time and action figures. There
That's
was
it.
also TV
And
series.
Stan was trying to sell
The TV where's the big
Marvel.
money is, yeah.
Yeah, so Stan was trying to sell Marvel in that way, you know, trying to you know, break into that other medium, you know, because you know, comic books were, there were certain ones that were selling really well, you know, like X-Men was just selling like crazy.
Did
But
it?
a lot of the
It
books,
was the $6 million man part of Marvel or no?
no, no, that was a TV series with Lee Major.
Because I remember the $6 Million Man, the Incredible
Bionic
Hulk,
Woman,
Bionic Woman.
Yeah.
I actually met them in Comic-Con in Austin here a few years ago. I loved it.
See, that's the thing. They're all very related to comics because everybody was reading comics. It was a pop culture phenomenon, so if we, have that in our DNA in this country, it's Star Trek, all those things that we were raised on. I may not have read comics, but I watched all the same
Was
shows.
Star Trek every part of any comics? Or was just a movie?
Oh yeah, they licensed it
before the movies. Before the movies?
Nope, it was just
after.
Gene Roddenberry created this series. Actually, Ricky Ricardo, Desi Arnaz had Desilu Studios, and he was the the studio behind. He found Gene Roddenberry, and he funded that Star Trek. So I love Lucy. I love Lucy Creator. He was a smart man. But yeah, so Star Trek, everybody's watching Star Trek. Everybody was watching Fireball XL5. And
so I thought something before I forget. At the same time, the cartoon industry or the cartoon fever was going on in Japan, or no? The anime.
Yes, anime.
So what was the influence of anime in Mark and vice versa?
I think he knew of it, but he didn't, it was a separate entity. And I think, anime was,
things are not so accessible like today, right?
Yeah,
Japan is
but
pretty far too.
I remember when we had the Nerve, our stage manager was so whooped on anime, and he would watch
that was huge. It's a huge part of Japanese culture.
And he loved it, and I just that had to be 1982. That had to be 1983, early 80s. Okay. So anime was still in existence, but there was no crossover or overlap with Marvel and that, except to say.
Why I asked that? Because I went to a Van Gogh expo, and I didn't know Van Gogh at one period of his life, he was very influenced by Japanese art.
Wow.
Yeah. So I thought maybe Mark was also influenced.
Yeah. No, he wasn't influenced by anime, but he was definitely influenced by Star Wars, Joseph Campbell, Heroes. He loved and
Tolkien, Lord of the Rings.
Yep, and Tolkien and Lord of the Rings and all
C.S. Lewis.
Yep, C.S. Lewis, all those very, series. And he watched the early, I think Poldark came out in 1970.
Really?
It was like I think the guy who played the magistrate in this rendition of Poldark was actually, his name was Robin Ellis, and Poldark came out in the 70s. And
we are talking about a Netflix series called Poldark, right?
Yeah.
And I remember you told me that you can see a lot of Mark in this character, right?
Absolutely.
His personality.
And he pulled me into it. I got into it. It was such a good story.
I got into it too.
I know. It was in black and white. I mean, it was not even in color, this one in the 70s.
So let's go back to when you met Mark again, and let's see how like from the moment that he met you to the moment of the church or the marriage, like what happened?
Yeah. Well, I could not believe that I was able to marry an artist who had a job, because I was paying all my boyfriends. I was paying for all my boyfriends. They were all artists, and because I was modeling, and because I made the most money, and because I, was generous, I paid for everything. And it was like I didn't even think twice about it, being Capt or anything like that.
It was either a Wall Street person with a lot of money, or an artist with no money.
Right. And I was hired as an
Things
actor.
didn't change much. I mean, it changed a lot with computer graphics, but there is still this pattern. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was you know, I was working in the legal field, and I did not have any attraction to those attorneys, but I was hired by a municipal bond firm down in Wall Street to do demonstrations on their new touchscreen technology. So they were morphing over from
wow, this was what, in the 90s?
Nope, it was in 1980.
Wow, touch screen. I didn't know touch screen was so old.
Huh. Yeah. So in like 1985, something like that, I worked on Wall Street, and I worked for a muni bond firm. It was an Irish firm. And so I traveled around the country demonstrating touchscreen technology and how.
What size was the touchscreen?
Like this big. It's like a TV. But it was an intelligent workstation. So they were trying to interface it with a lot of the ticker tape things that, you know, that were reading off the rates and how the market was fluctuating.
And what was the content of that? It was more artistic, or because even personal computers were not existing at that time, right?
I was just hired because they figured if this blonde could figure it out, I could.
A blonde that is not from California, by the way.
Right. I could teach it to the other people. But, you know, my God, this Wall Street thing, they smoke cigars. I was trying to do demonstrations in a conference room. Everybody's smoking a cigar. Can you imagine? Because it was before the days where they banned smoking. And my eyes were tearing. I was, you know, my throat was closing up, and they're puffing away.
And that was when the Wall Street movie came up, right?
Yeah, it was probably a few years before that, though, because it had to build to what it became. Because it was, I went, you know, I just, and they were trying to groom me for Wall Street. You know, they got me in as this actress, and I was touring around the United States talking about, you know, touchscreen technology. And Kevin, who ran the firm.
So sorry if I'm fixing on that question. Like, what was this touch screen for? It's not clear for me yet.
Yeah, so the touch screen was, you know, when you want to activate, you know, like instead of a keyboard, it was on the screen. You could touch the screen, and it was pixels, and it would activate the transaction.
But you mean
there's no keyboard?
Oh, you're talking about the financial market. So it's almost like a computer there.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
And so the screen
the touch screen is connected to a computer.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And you do, you know, you can do all the, I mean, you're not typing, you're just doing.
Yeah, because it's all about speed, right? Especially
and
at
you're
that time.
Doing transactions. Right.
Got
so
it.
I was in charge of selling that equipment to all the municipal bond firms that they were servicing. So I had to go demonstrate how easy it was to use touchscreen. So I had a demonstration, and I would demonstrate it, and then they would say, okay, we're going to take it. And then I would go in, and then we would install the touchscreen intelligent workstation and teach them how to use it. And, you know, I did that for, 3 years, something like that. And I got.
That was before you met Mark? Before you met Mark?
I got so much material for my comedy group. Oh my God. I was working on Wall Street, writing satire for corporate America. So.
And work as a model.
And working in the law firm.
No, how about the model gig?
And modeling, yeah.
And modeling.
But that was my modeling job, because I got hired as a model.
Oh, got it. It was specific.
Like demonstrate. Think of it as more of a demonstration. So they gave me a full wardrobe, full expense account. I was traveling from office to office and training people on intelligent workstations and getting
Then
them
you
to
got
buy them.
then
Getting
how did you go from there to being a model for Marvel?
I was still going up for jobs. So I was going up for this job, that job, and Marvel was just another job.
Freelancer, got it.
It's
Yeah.
just another freelance. So you want to work for a convention for 3 days, So I could pretty much make my own hours down at the municipal bond firm, so long as I sold and went around. I mean, I had to go on the road, so then I was on the road. But I mean, that was so cushy. I got a full wardrobe, full expense account, going from firm to firm, talking about, just basically acting. Because I had to act like I was a Wall Street banker or something, and I was telling them about, oh, this is the latest technology and, demonstrating it. And this is, so getting them basically to buy. I was basically selling new technology, um,
So then, then you met Mark eventually
then
one
I
of
was
those
just,
jobs.
in the meantime, I was modeling, and then I was modeling for the Television Academy, and they asked me if I wanted to go to Africa to give us an award to the Voice of Kenya television station, and I said yes. So I went to Africa for 4 weeks, and it was just, it was like one of those kind of great times, and I had all these little side hustles that I was doing, modeling. I was working in the law firm.
You're also following your passion like Mark.
Yeah.
You're also following what you wanted to do.
Yeah. And then
besides being on a room full of cigar
I know
smoking people.
And the fact is that I was plus size, but I wasn't so plus size that I couldn't fit into like the way a normal office worker is supposed to look. But for the industry, I was plenty plus. So I was, this new thing coming along was plus size modeling. And I had enough stand-up background, and I had enough acting background, and I was, doing this demonstration.
So you're doing stand-up comedies too?
Yeah, from the
you're
nerve.
Writing and acting.
Right.
Okay,
so I
thought you
knew
were
how
just
to
writing.
speak, do public speaking, like I did with the touchscreen technology.
And you were funny.
And I was funny, and I was writing, and it was just I got hired to do writing jobs for industrials, writing jobs for expos, and I would write the script and go out and perform it, and and it was good money. It was like $4,000 a week, so it was pretty. It's pretty good in the 80s.
Especially at that time, yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that was, I just had this, what are you doing? And I was like, which day? But right. I could, and I had the office background, but I was constantly, but when I came back from Vegas, I was writing a show out there, and the guys from the group said, we didn't rehearse, so we canceled the gig. And I was like, what? We could do this stuff in our sleep. And I think they were so jealous of me because I was getting hired to be the woman comedy writer, because there weren't that many women comedy writers. So I was hired to
not
be
even
women
today,
comedy writer. So and I felt like bad. I felt like imposter, because I was like, I'm only funny with these guys. So I had myself convinced that I couldn't be funny without them, and maybe we should break up. So we broke up. I mean, I went away to on the road with this writing gig and we went to all these different expos. I came back, and I had all this money, and I put it all back into the group, got us a big giant suit that we all burst out of. I paid to have that made, and we all fit inside the suit. We burst out of it like an egg. I had paid for everything, so the fact that they were jealous about that, so anyway.
So let's go back to your relationship with Mark and how Mark left Marvel.
Yeah, so that was So he didn't really leave Marvel. Marvel left him.
Okay, that's a good distinction. Yeah.
Yeah. So
and why that? So why that?
What happened was, unfortunately, the whole movie and CGI business was not what it was, like we were saying. And the comic book sales started to dwindle. X-Men was still selling, but Ron Perlman, who bought Marvel, bought it because it was a good thing for him to pick the bone. He was a corporate raider. He picked the bones dry and brought his cronies in. And
so he bought Marvel from Revlon.
Yeah, basically ran it into the ground. So they went bankrupt.
Okay, so he was just like, look at the numbers. He didn't have any artistical background, any love for the industry, nothing.
Right, he had no love for the industry.
That happens a lot, yeah.
And he was a corporate raider, and then he would, to pick the bones clean of Marvel.
Just think about the bottom line, right?
Right, and then tell Mark to work on morale. So it became a very, like, after we got married in 92, great time, 93, 94, and 95, it was like, what the hell?
Marvel had turned to a place that was not so fun anymore to work.
You can love your job too much. Can you imagine this job that you loved so much and you were so good at, and so good at keeping that culture and the environment, the work environment, so
you put your heart and your soul
fun
there.
Yeah, he was the heart and soul of Marvel Comics. And then they made him, those same people he had to train, he had to fire on Christmas week.
Really?
Christmas week. And
well,
they had broke his heart. Literally broke
literally.
His heart. Literally.
How about Stan Lee? Stan Lee, how did Stan Lee
and he was out of the picture.
He was already out.
Stan was out trying to make deals. He finally sold a script for Spider-Man. So I think one of the first superhero movies that Marvel made was that did any good was Spider-Man.
It was a computer graph. I was in LA around 2002, and I remember that was one of the very first movies in full. A friend of mine was studying a computer graphics school there, and he said the Spider-Man is going to be all computer graphics, and it's like unbelievable. And it's like, it's unbelievable in New York in computer graphics, right? So anyway, Mark. So
imagine Stan Lee thinks this character up that's swinging from building to building, and you can actually make it happen. So right. But that didn't happen. That did not happen until way after Mark had passed away.
So before we go to Mark's leaving Marvel, just tell us a little bit more of the interaction between Mark and Stan. Like, how did they interact?
Well, I think
how was their relationship?
Yeah, Stan really appreciated Mark's love for him, and it wasn't false. It was, he truly loved Stan, and he truly wanted everyone to appreciate and love comics the way he did. And Stan knew that about him and said he was the heart and soul of Marvel Comics, that he was as much a part of the masthead as Marvel itself. So he was Mark Eugene Grunewald, Marvel Entertainment Group, MEG, I am Marvel, and he really felt that. And
when say that again. Say that again. Say that
Marvel
again.
Entertainment Group, Mark Eugene Grunewald, MEG, Marvel Entertainment Group. Those were his initials and the company's initials. And he was like, I was made for this job. And I was like, Mark, you're loving your job too much, but the good thing
Stan Lee saw him as a son. Was the age gap so big, or no, or more like a brother?
No, I think he saw him as a very valuable executive, as a worker in his
artist,
company.
An artist.
And he said to me, because one of the things they used to do in the 90s and in the 80s was they would reward the mom and pop comic book stores. Those were the lifeblood of Marvel. They would sell the books and sales would go, and they loved the books, and Marvel would treat them once a year to a distributor's retreat.
That's
So
great.
they would take them on vacation, completely all expense paid vacation.
And they will meet the artists too, like Mark.
And so all of the comic book stores get to party with Marvel.
Wow,
so they took them on
huge.
vacation.
Yeah.
And so the last day, Stan would come. So you imagine you're like a mom and pop comic book store, and all these guys that you're partying with, all the people who create the books that you love. And then God walks in, then Stan walks in, and he is the nicest guy, and these guys are just so clever and so witty and so, I just love the people in the comic book business. And he turned to me and he goes, look at these guys. I thought this stuff up when I was, writing, and who knew that they were going to take it and make it. And they're so good at what they do, and they're so good at what I envisioned that it was going to be. And I thought,
let's talk about the executives now, right?
Yeah, just all the people on staff, how great it was to work, and they had a love of the characters, they had a love of the Marvel universe, and they were so happy to be working for their childhood hero. It was a very,
what is a childhood hero? What is a childhood hero?
Like Stan Lee,
Oh, the working for the childhood hero.
Yeah,
you got it.
Your childhood hero is Stan Lee, who created all of the characters that you loved as a kid. So now you're writing the characters that you loved as a kid and working for the guy who created the characters you loved as a kid.
Dream come true. Dream come true.
Unbelievable. So when it fell hard, though, they gave him in 1992, they gave all the executives 10,000 shares of stock. So they gave the executives 10,000 shares.
Was that a lot?
It was when it went up and split, and went up again and split, and went up again and split. So Mark's $10,000 became $2 million
at that time.
Yeah. So
became in the future or at that time?
No, right at that time. And I mean, it was quite a net. I mean, it split so many times. I remember him saying, every day I get the paper because I want to see what the stock went up to.
And that's pre-movie industry.
Yes, pre-movie. It was still doing really well. The comic books were selling really well between 90 and 95. They were selling great. And so that was, the salad days. And they, unfortunately, though, they were doing stupid things like putting out the same book with 5 different covers. And the fans were on to them. They were like, please, just keep
that's absurd.
Coming, but don't bilk us. Don't feel like we're a fool, So and
so this is 95. So when this new guy came and he was all about numbers, and then the culture started to become toxic? When was that?
Well, he was already 92. Perlman already owned Marvel, but he didn't start stripping it until like 94, 95. He
started showing his flaws later on.
He started to, and then it really started to disintegrate, and they declared bankruptcy. So can you imagine that it went from this really successful, booming business to bankrupt?
So from the point Mark got the bonus, that was probably like 2 million, to the point of bankruptcy, how many years is the period?
3.
Oh my God, that was a quick fall.
Yeah, quick. And that's why it was so tragic, because Perlman did all the wrong things. I mean, he just stripped it, and then told
that was purposeful, like he was actually a spy for DC or something. Me and my conspiratory mind.
No, I think he was just greedy. It was just greed. And when it was really a sad time, because everybody, all his friends, all the people he had hired, all got fired.
He groomed.
He was all by himself at this place.
So, okay, so Mark had to fire everybody under him?
Like 35 people.
How many people in total there were before?
You know, there's probably 100 people. He probably had to fire a third of them. You know, and he was trying to get them jobs. That broke his
heart, literally.
Yeah, and he was trying to get them jobs, and Marvel was like, "You can't do that. You know, you just have to, you know, put your head down and." You know, so he was.
How would he give him jobs? Jobs outside of
Marvel? Yeah, like I found this job. You're doing this. You know, anything to keep them.
There was no LinkedIn at that time, no referral.
No, they had they didn't know how. He said, I can't even get them jobs flipping burgers because they don't even know how to work as a short order cook. All they know how to do is comics. That's all I trained them to do.
So sad, so sad.
And it was it was just so sad. And then he was like, they came up to our house and he said, oh, John has a tuition and this one has a medical bill and that one has a house payment. And I was like,
that one just married, they had a kid or something.
Right. And he cared about all these people. Oh, and I was like,
especially that he felt himself responsible for these people, like Captain America, right?
Because he knew them personally and he cared about them. That was his universe. When I started dating him, Moses, I went to his apartment. He had everybody framed on the wall who he worked with. Framed pictures of all 50 people on the wall that he worked with in frames.
Like family.
That was his universe. And I was like, oh my God, who does this? Most people want to get away.
Person, right? Yeah.
Most people want to get away from people they work with.
That's a person that who really love his job.
Right.
And love.
And that's why I knew I had made it when he made a place on his wall. And he put my picture up there. And I was like, wow.
Did he ever create a character based on you?
Yes. Yeah. You know, the one that Free Spirit, the Kathy Webster. So that's a combination of me and Capt, Cutie.
Oh, your niece?
Yeah.
Niece, right? My wife.
Yeah. The niece.
That's good.
The niece. And
so Free Spirit is a combination of you and her?
Yeah. And even my sister's in the book because he had a way of naming people or creating people who
which sister of yours was in the book?
Claire May.
Oh,
yeah, she was a lab technician. She was a lab technician.
And then he used her name?
No, well, she wasn't. She didn't use her name, but she was definitely. She had the short red hair and the glasses and everything.
So he will get some of the basic personality or physical features, and then he will create a character, fictional character based on reality, right?
Yeah. And that was cool. The female Captain America. So it was a really, really cool character.
Oh, she was a fine female Captain America.
Yeah.
A counterpart, female counterpart.
Yeah.
Okay, so you told Mark had a heart literally broken with what happened.
Yeah, so imagine having, you know, in 1995, and they took Captain America away from him. He had written it for 10 years.
Really?
And sales were kind of plummeting. And they wanted to give it to somebody else. And he said, well, I guess my time's over, you know, and I was like,
it's like losing a kid, right?
Yeah. And they gave it to somebody, and it was a terrible writer. He just didn't do the right thing with it. And
was he groomed by Mark? Was he taught by Mark?
He was hired by Mark.
But didn't have
he became
the same creativity.
You know, a bigger he wrote other books and he became like a star on his own. Because these people like Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, Rob Liefeld, they all became stars in Marvel. And you know,
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
Don McFarlane started in Marvel.
Mark would say, I never made it to the mountaintop, and I said, yeah, but you built the mountain for all the people to climb on. You know, Paul Levitt said that too. You know, the president of DC said, he may not have made it to the mountaintop, but he built a mountain that other people climbed on.
So let me just, as a curiosity, Tom McFarlane is famous for what again?
Spawn.
Huh?
Spawn.
Spawn.
Okay.
And he was taught by Mike or no?
No, he wasn't taught by Mark.
He was just working at the same time.
Because he I wonder what, I don't know his I mean, it's people like Wes Craven.
Doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
All those people that were coming through Marvel's doors, they had enough notoriety on their own. They didn't need to train with Mark,
Right. They were hired because they were already good in what they did.
Yeah, they were already famous.
Okay. So let's get personal again. So this was happening on the professional field, and how that reflected in his personal life, in his relationship, in his health, everything.
Yeah, it was, he's a type A personality, so I didn't know how bad it was. And that's something that he was very good at, because he's a Gemini, and he could care less about astrology, but anyway, he had two personalities, but he
has an outside persona,
and
one inside
also,
that nobody really.
Yeah, he kept everything to himself, and because he didn't want anybody to feel as despondent as he did, so he was constantly trying to buoy people up. And at the same time, his parents' health was going down. So his father in 1978 was bitten by a Lyme's tick in Lyme's, Connecticut. He had no idea that it was Lyme disease. And it went for like 2 years unchecked. And by that time, it had morphed into some like Lou Gehrig's disease, that he was in a wheelchair, and he was 58 years old. So he learned, his father was crippled, and he saw, and
Mark was 40. Mark was 40.
Yeah, he was 1978. Mark was
probably, no, I mean, if his father 24. Was 58. No, wait. If his father was 58.
No, when he got bitten by Lyme's disease, he was in 1978, he was probably in his 40s. Because Mark was 24 when his dad got bit, so 18 and 24 is like 52.
So the father declined gradually.
Yeah, but he for 2 years it went unchecked, so he didn't go all that gradually. He got crippled very quickly, and he was in major pain. So his mother, who was long suffering, did not want to admit, that she was suffering, and she created this Well Spouse Foundation. So when one spouse is well and the other one isn't, that one becomes the caregiver. So she was Mark's father's caregiver. She was his dad's caregiver. And it took a tremendous toll from her, because she, as I said, she was long suffering, and I think she had some alcoholism that she turned to. And I'll tell you, these Grunewalds are really good at hiding everything, and keeping a secret identity hidden. And
so let me tell you just one thing. We could continue this conversation for hours, but we have around 25 minutes.
Right.
I want you to just talk about Mark, right? How was his health and everything, and talk about yourself too, what you have been doing,
Yeah.
So and everything.
I realized that Mark said to me, I don't know what I'm going to do about Marvel, and I don't know what I'm going to do about my parents. And he had never, ever admitted defeat on any level. And I said, wow, this guy is really in
superhero.
So yeah, he cannot think of a way out of this. He cannot. And that's when it became,
it's a precursor.
He had this free-floating depression that he always had, but it became very, very dark. It was a really dark time. And he was totally using Marvel and then go up to our country house and build in the woods until he would drop. So I wouldn't see him, and he'd be out there building, you know, and writing.
He built the house with his own hands?
Yeah, it was an outlet for him. So
it was a glass house, right? A glass
yeah,
house.
it was a glass house, and he was in the woods. We had 7 acres, and he named all the places on the property after all the people in at Marvel. He named all the trees after Nordic and Celtic gods.
And people visit this place still?
Yeah, I went last week, and it's under construction, so it's being renovated, because it was already 30 years old when we bought the house, so it needed to be worked on. But it was a beautiful house. It was a glass house on a ravine that dropped down, and it was a glass house in the back on these pylons. So you were floating in a forest. I mean, this was a superhero's house. I swear to God.
Oh,
he was such a nature boy.
Frank Lloyd Wright, right?
Yes,
the integration between
Wright.
architecture and nature.
Yeah, glass.
Was he a fan of Frank Lloyd Wright? Was he a fan?
He was. Well,
I'm a big fan too.
Wasn't, because he didn't really know architecture, but when you saw this house, it was such a beautifully constructed house, and it was and it was weird. So we bought this house. Nobody wanted it, but we bought it because it was weird. You know, it was just a glass house in the middle of the woods. Perfect. And I said, you know, Mark, we're in the middle of the woods here. We're like 7 acres, and we're far away from the main road. And if we ever have to have an ambulance come up here, they'll never find us. And he said, well, I'll take my chances. So that's kind of what happened.
No privacy.
That's what happened. So we were up there we bought the house in 93, and he passed away in 96. So we'd been up there for 3 years, but we were still in the city. So we were only up there on the weekends.
It was a country house.
The city. So that was our country house, but it was his refuge, and he loved that house so much. And you know, we had.
I think many fans would love to visit their house, since there is Mark's.
Yes, exactly. I know. Well, when it gets,
I can put the address in the description later if somebody wants to visit this house.
Yeah, because
let me know later.
Quaker Lake. I went up there I went up on Valentine's Day to see Daryl Hall. He had a house up there, Daryl Hall, Hall & Oates. He had a recording studio in his house, and he bought the cafe on the main road, and he turned it into Daryl's house. So I went up to see my friend perform, and my friend had a car, and I said, I want to drive up and see my house. So we drove up and all the winding roads, and we got there, and it was under construction, and it was like totally, you know, Tyvek stuff in the yard, and it was snowing.
So they're remodeling.
Like I just was like, oh well, at least they didn't rip it down. You know, they're renovating it.
Okay, so what happened then?
Yeah, so then I feel like they were really taking him just really torturing
the extreme him.
They were telling him to work on morale, save the company.
So wait. They asking him to fire all these people that he loved to work with, and work on the morale.
No, work on morale. Yeah.
I mean, he didn't give the finger to them.
I think that's one of the reasons why he had to have that country house as a refuge, because he was trying to keep it together, but he could not see a way with his parents or with Marvel a way out. He just couldn't, you know. So I tried to
challenges everything. Challenges coming all at the same time, right?
Challenges from all directions, and he felt the weight of everyone's all
emotional challenge.
It went from such a great place to work to such a horrible place to work. I mean,
paradise to hell.
Yes, absolutely. And so I didn't really. I mean, he was pretty good at disguising it, but occasionally he would snap and lose it, and I was like, whoa, this is not the Mark I know, you know. So I just wanted to make him happy and support him, and I felt as though something because he was taking screenwriting classes because he could see the writing on the wall was going to be movies. So he would
no therapy. He was not doing any therapy at the
He
time.
was, but then when I went to visit his therapist, he said, I told him stuff, and he said, Mark never even told me that. So he was keeping everybody
Right.
happy. He was telling a line. He said, I'm telling everybody a line of happy horse shit. And I was like, well, why? You know, what are you trying to tap dance on the grave here for? You know, so it was his job to, you know, kind of put the smoke screen up there and not have anybody realize how bad it was. But he
so he was taking screenwriter classes,
yeah, he was
because
taking
he knew the
courses.
movies was going to be the next thing.
He knew, and he was, you know, you know, probably figuring out his exit strategy. But he, you know, he had plenty of places he could have gone to. DC, anybody who helped, would have hired him.
Everything.
Yeah, he could have gone out to California, but he was going to stay to the end. He was going down. He was
Marvel was his baby, right?
Yeah, Marvel was his life.
Captain America was
he was going to write it out, but he did not know how deadly that kind of a game plan was, and it took its toll. And then so in August, beginning of August, he was working
of 96 of 96.
He was working very, very hard, and he was so excited because his sister, brother-in-law, and his nieces and nephews were coming out for 2 weeks to stay in our house. So they came out Friday, the like the 9th or 10th, something like that. And we spent the whole weekend together. We, you know, had such a great time. It was a beautiful summer day.
And apparently he was okay.
And he was fine. Yeah, he was fine. But he was coming down from this horrific, you know, week of trying to get everything, you know, where he could leave. And he had the Captain America that was released that week in his backpack. So he hadn't written it. So he had that back. He had that Captain America that hit the stands that week. That he had nothing to do with. And that had to compound it too.
He had the Captain America that was written by this other guy that came that didn't have the same quality.
It came out that week. So
wow, everything at the same time. One shock after the other.
Perfect storm. And
it's like a feeling of betrayal.
Yeah, exactly. It was betrayal. You know, like I guess they don't need
disillusion.
Yeah, disillusion,
disrespect, everything.
Like he didn't feel
all the ingredients for a very good deep depression.
Yep.
Or something else.
Or a Monday morning heart attack. So when you and I realized that Mark had become a statistic, because when you're
wait. You realized the what?
He had become a statistic, because 63% of men's heart attacks happen on Monday morning. And they happen because you're relaxed and all of the LDLs flood and the HDLs are out of balance. And those LDLs are what, you know, throw you into. And he also had a heart condition.
Let's define LDLs.
LDL is some HDL and LDL is
like cholesterol thing.
It's something, yeah. It's I don't know exactly what it's
like a stress hormone or something, right?
But you get flooded with LDLs under stress, and
like cortisol.
Yeah, cortisol. And he had a heart condition, which I didn't realize because he was 43. You know, he just turned.
Never had anything with the heart before.
Never had any heart condition, but his father had a congenital thing, because that's what, you know, his father was going through, this heart, you know, thing that he had. And I said, well, maybe it was in the family, and it was. So he had a heart.
It can be genetic and epigenetic too, right? It's a long discussion.
And you're 42, you're a non-smoker, didn't take drugs, you know, vegetarian, didn't eat that much.
Oh, he was vegetarian. I didn't know that.
He was super healthy, jogged every day. You know, it was like, he was
Was
the
he
last
against eating
person.
animals? Was he against, or just because of health?
No, it was a choice.
Okay.
He wanted to be
That was
healthy.
ahead of his time, because many people are
Right,
more vegetarian there than
right,
then.
right.
Okay, so let's see if we can finish that, and I want to hear about your
Yeah,
work
so
now.
he just, I feel as though his his destiny was kind of his parents were spiraling down, moral spiraling down. He can't save it. He's got this, heart
A
condition.
bastard Captain
And then
American magazine.
and then Monday morning I have 8 bookings in the city, modeling
He
bookings.
had eight
And
bookings.
I
Oh,
wake
you
up.
had or him?
I did. And
Oh,
so
you
I was
did.
going to
Okay.
take the car. So I woke up and he's thrashing around and I'm like, Mark, let me, and I suddenly realized he's not kidding. And he went incontinent. And I was like, he's really not kidding. And so I screamed and his sister came running in and he had sat up and he slumped over and she said, I think he's dead.
Oh,
And
the
I was
family
like,
was still there.
oh yeah, they were going to be there for 2 weeks. 2 weeks. So
Ah,
everybody
okay.
was there.
Oh
Thank
my
God. I don't think
goodness.
I could have explained to
Right.
his family that I couldn't have saved him. I could not have saved him. He was young, his heart blew up, and he was almost dead instantly. So I called, and the phone wasn't working because we had very sporadic service in the middle of the woods. So he had bought me a cell phone, and I
Mhm.
never used it. And I turned it on, and I didn't know how to turn it off.
Wait, a cell phone in 96?
Yeah,
Oh yeah, they had the big
right, but it
bricks,
was
right?
a big, like,
Yeah.
Motorola touch.
Nokia or Motorola,
Yeah, so
big
I
brick.
made a call to 911 and I told the
And
EMS
you
to
were
come.
far from the city, huh?
I was far, and I suddenly realized how deep in the woods we were. So I had my park on. It was, I put this coat over my negligee, and I'm out there flagging them onto the property. And they were trying to revive him in the room. His nephew kept coming out saying, Mark, he's not getting better, he's not coming around. So this 5-year-old who now looks like Captain America, who made it his mission to become Captain America because his uncle had written it and died. I mean, his sister kept his memory so alive with this little boy, and he is totally Captain America now. Aaron
So
is
wait. You're too quick for me. So he's there. Did he
his
say
little
any
nephew,
word?
my
Did he
little
say any
nephew.
word? But did
No,
Mark did he say any word?
no, he
Any
just
last
died.
word?
He
Okay.
just died.
So how this little kid fits in the picture? I got lost.
So his that was his sister's son. So his
He
sister and
was there.
brother-in-law came with the
He was
kids for
there.
2 weeks, and so his sister was trying to revive him, and
And the boy come in the picture. The boy
Aaron
comes.
was watching the whole thing.
Oh my! And Mark was his hero.
Right, and Mark with Uncle Mark, Uncle Mark. So Mark, so Gail, his sister, has kept Mark's memory alive very, very well. And so
Does she
Aaron's now,
write a book? Did she
yeah,
write a book?
Aaron is now Captain America.
Oh, the
So
little boy.
yeah, the
He
little
got
boy
he
became
got
a superhero.
the
Yep,
values and the personality that
yep.
Mark was
Yep,
embodying.
and he's a trainer
Wow.
now, and he is. I'll show you a picture of him. He looks more like Captain America than any
Oh,
Captain
really?
America
How
that
cute.
he's
Yeah, how
beefed
cute.
up to the max. So, but I had to stay up there for 10 months, with the house,
How did
and
you do how did you deal with this loss,
I
Catherine?
know and it was funny because it wasn't funny. 750 people were at the funeral the next day, and I have to get up in front of them and speak, and that was the hardest thing. So my sister Claire May is an energy balancer, so she came and immediately she flew out, and she every time I had to speak, she would center my energy, ruffle me, do all kinds of healing touch oils, and I never lost it. I had to. I don't know about you, but when I'm
Do you
standing
remember
in front
what
of
you said to
somebody,
those 750 people?
yes, and I had to talk about who Mark was as a person, and the loss that we're all suffering. And he was this most serious, silly person, and he was
Serious, silly.
serious and silly, and and they all knew it. So I had a tribute, and people were more than happy to help me, and so I really sent him off well. I did a whole compendium of bounce down of all the tapes of his life, and we had a tribute for him. And I had the Three Stooges there because he liked the Three Stooges. I had them imposter. It was a fun tribute, as much as it could be fun, so
that's cool.
But Claire May came, stayed with me for about a week or so, and then she went home and walked into her home in Oaks Boulevard, and Dave had died. Her husband had died. While she was back with me, he was, probably dead for a few days.
Oh, I didn't know about this time frame.
Yeah.
Wow.
So she walks in and she calls me. She goes, "You're never going to believe it, but Dave died." And
Oh
I was
my
like,
God.
"What?"
Two sisters widow in a week.
Right. Within 10, it was like a Chekhov play, The sisters were reunited by the death of
My
their
God, yeah.
And so
Wow.
wow. So
Life is full of
we
surprises, huh?
processed it, and she said, "We're going to go channel our husbands in Sebastopol." So we're going up to this, Northern California town and meet this woman who's a channeler. So she wrote this book. Marcia Nelson wrote this book, Coming Home to Myself or something like that. And she channeled our husbands, and we were able to ask him questions like, "Why did you die?" and all that. So Mark said that he died because I was the last thing that he had to figure out were relationships, and I gave him a great relationship, and there was nothing more that he could do. He had the perfect career. He had the best possible time at Marvel, and he couldn't. So he had to check out.
So he died because he felt that he was done.
It was done. He didn't
He
have
learned
anything else to
everything he wanted
accomplish.
to learn
In
in
the
his
meantime,
lifetime.
he left me with his parents. He left me with the house. He left me with his parents' house.
And
So
also
I
a
had,
daughter too, right? He
and
also
the
left a daughter
daughter,
from the
the
previous man.
stepdaughter. So her bitchy mother came up, stood in my kitchen, and said, "I can't believe Mark did this to me." What? I can't believe Mark did this to me. Took
People
Sarah
say the
away.
most weird things when they are in pain, right?
I know. And
Yeah.
took Sarah away. She should have stayed there with her cousin.
Sarah is his daughter.
Yeah. She should have
Only
stayed
daughter.
there with her cousins and mourned him. Instead, Belinda took her, the wife, the ex-wife took her and wouldn't let her talk about Mark in the car on the way home. Would not let her process anything.
Yeah, it's all result of trauma,
Yeah. So just suppressed
sad.
it.
Yeah. So wow.
And
And
Sarah got on to psychotropic drugs at 10, and that really messed her up. So, I really feel like the bad parent lived, and she would be a completely different person now if Mark had been able to coach her artistic ability. And
were they close when he was alive?
Oh God, yes.
Yeah.
Very.
Oh,
and that's why I say whatever you do with your kids, do it full-heartedly, because she still remembers everything about him and still remembers.
It's still a role model for her.
So it was a great time, and we were all together up in that house together, enjoying ourselves. And it's just a very special time. And she never came back to that house after that. And I told her she had to go through her things. I weren't going to throw them out. So she came up one more time and went through her toys. And then I sold the house and I moved back to the city, and I threw myself into my work. And
so yeah, let's talk about your work and also these events that sometimes you do, right? Related to let's see if we can talk this in the next 5 minutes.
I guess I was very lucky in that I had my career and I could fall back into it, because I had to decide whether or not I wanted to stay up in that house in the middle of the woods or come back to the city. And I said, I'm going to come back to the city. So I came back to the city, and this company, Freedom LLC, was creating a magazine. It was a plus size magazine. So it was called Mode, and they hired me to be an editor, and I did Mode on the road. So I packed up my bags. I didn't have to tell anybody I was a recent widow. I could just go from city to city to city to city.
That was a therapy in itself, right?
Yeah.
It was a
And
therapy in itself.
I don't know why they thought that giving a widow this kind of a job was good, but I took it, and I did it with a complete and utter 1,000%, threw myself into it. And it really helped me heal, and I could tell people if I wanted to. And it was the beginning of me getting bit with the event production bug. So I took the pages of the magazine and took it to all these cities and did the morning show and did fashion shows in every city around the United States. And it was a big time for Mode and for the plus size industry. We went from 550, maybe 500 designers to 2,000 designers in a matter of a few years. I took the subscriptions from 200,000 to 4
No,
million.
this was a magazine. And what was the name of the magazine again?
The plus size magazine called Mode.
It's called Mode. Okay.
M-O-D-E,
Does it still exist?
No. So we were just about ready to get bought by this German company, Berta, and the deal was supposed to be inked on 9/11. And we know what happened on 9/11. So the Germans went back to Germany. The deal fell off the table and the magazine closed. So everybody called me saying, what are we going to do? The industry's over. And I was like, I'll think of something. So I had an apartment, and I invited a couple people to come and live with me. And I said, we're going to build this industry back. And we created Curve Style, which was one of the first multi designer fashion shows. And because Mark expected the worst and hoped for the best and planned for the worst, I had an insurance policy. So he had left me with this insurance policy, and he left Sarah with a trust fund. So, and then I sold his parents' house. So I had enough money to produce this event. So I did that, threw myself into it, and I drove a bike around the city in those days. And it was raining one day, and I had to take the subway, and I'm standing on the platform, and this Italian guy comes up to me and says, I like your coat. And I was like, oh, okay, I think I like you too. And so we started talking, and I was like, this guy is cute. And I was like, I thought I was 43 and I was going to be washed up and nobody would love me anymore. So here's this guy, completely, taken by me. And I was like, okay.
Like chivalrous, yes. Chivalrous, so like a good Italian, right?
He told me, so I took his card and we talked on the phone, and I thought he was going to be one of those Italians who doesn't understand English. His English was impeccable. And he asked me, have you ever been married, or you have a relationship? I said, actually, are you sitting down? I was married to the #2 guy in Marvel Comics, and he wrote Captain America longer than anyone. And Stefano said, I read his work growing up in Italy, and I learned English from Captain
I even
America.
got goosebumps here. He learned English from Captain America. So the reason he's in the US is because of Captain
rock and roll, and Captain America was his favorite. So he learned from rock and roll, the Rolling Stones, and comics. So they're Italy.
And he loved like you food, right? He loved food.
Yeah, and he loved food. He loved food, and he loved comics, and he loved rock and roll. And just like you, knowing about Hulk, he knew all the different comic books. And Mark had a translator for his fan mail. So he translated to all the languages and sent fan mail back to all these kids. I don't think Stefano ever had the gumption to write
Oh,
it in,
he translated the letters.
yeah, yeah. So that's how that's how much he answered his fan mail. So, but I feel as though I met Stefano and he was able to kind of get my groove back, but he wasn't the right person. I was still too too in grieving for Mark, and I swear you should really give yourself a few years to get over it. Don't think you're okay.
Oh
You,
yeah,
you
yeah,
can.
yeah.
But I
So,
seem
so
like I
okay,
was
so let's recap here. You met Stefano how long after
a year,
Mark's passage?
a
1 year.
year.
Okay.
So I actually met him in 90. Mark died in 96. My magazine started in 97.
So you think ideally you would be in a new relationship for more than 1 year?
Yeah,
Waited more until like the grief, the
yeah, I just I had
you're
too
still
much to do to unravel Mark's life, and to move. I had to move. I just didn't want anything. That's the grieving part. I didn't want anything that reminded me of him. I wanted to start
yeah.
over, and that's
Okay,
the
so
bad
uh
part.
and
That's the
and
bad
that
part.
so you wanted to start over, and then that goes a whole circle with what you're doing now, because you have been reviving some of those magazines and doing
Yeah,
this
I got, yep, I got bit by the event bug, and then I went back and I still did fashion. I still did diversity. I got hired by a hotel to do this entity that I called Runway the Real Way. So it's fashion diversity on the inclusive catwalk. So now it's not just plus, it's everybody. And so, but the funny thing is that his fans got to be in their 40s, and they are now successful business people who want to hark back to when they were stimulated by Mark's work. So
yeah,
I
yeah.
know a lot of his fans, and a lot of his fans are producing me, and a lot of his fans have things like comic book stores, and they had a flood in their comic book stores, and they know I'm sustainable, trying to be more sustainable, and they called me and asked me what they could do with this boatload of comics. And I said, I've been looking for some sort of a decoupage thing. So
A
I said,
what?
give them to
Some
me.
form of a what? Uh,
Decoupage. So it's
well,
like when you
let's spell this word here.
DECOUPAGE. It's a French word, and it means collage. And so you put comic books on to pieces of jewelry,
Mm,
little pieces of comics. You glue them on,
mm.
and then you resin them. So you put this resin on the comics, on the piece of jewelry, and it makes it shiny.
And those were comics that these fan guys were selling, but then one of them had a flood in the store,
Yep.
and then he donated you those
Yep.
magazines.
I,
Got it.
I got I got
And then
thousands
you
of
made a you're making a lemonade out of a lemon.
exactly. So I made these pieces, and I made this jewelry, and I was like, I really suddenly I hired an artist to help me to, because I had an idea of what it was going to be, and she did it, and I said it's able to be done that way. So I'm working with this resin, working with the comics, and Mark gets inducted into the Hall of Fame, wins the
Oh, he is
Eisner
going
Award.
to, or he was already?
He wasn't in the Hall of Fame. He
He
got
was not.
inducted in 2022, and that's when the Contest of the Champions came out again. And then he had me, and this is probably the most telling thing, is when I opened up the will the morning that he died, it said, I want to be cremated and my ashes put into a comic book. So I did that with Marvel. I drove up to the plant and I took his ashes and I stirred them into the ink, but you couldn't use that many. So I had a lot left over. So cut to like 25 years later, I said I want to do another rendition of throwing him into his work, because I said he threw himself into his work. but then it's illegal to do that. So I created something I call the Ashlograph. So this is what it looks like.
Ashlograph?
Ashlograph. So it's his autograph. And I take the resin in a mold. See, it's about a 16th of an inch. And I put ashes in there so you can see
That's his ashes.
the ashes in there. And I said, yep, he's in there.
Some of his DNA is there, a little burned out. But...
So, and it looks really good. It's
so this is like a plate. What is that?
No, it's a book cover. So this is a book cover.
A book cover. Okay, so this, what is inside the? Oh, the book is the champion.
It's the contest. So it's a new edition. So okay, we bought 100 of them, and then I put this cover over it and shrink wrapped it. This is not shrink wrapped because this is my copy. Okay, so this is the book that he wrote about the manuals, right? That's Mark. No, this is not. Can you show a little bit more? This is contest. Spend some seconds. Can you spend a few seconds of his photo again? Many people might not know. This is the book that he wrote that I bought 100 copies of. And then I made this jacket. See, this is the book jacket. Okay, so let me see his photo again. So here he is. Yeah, let me see. Wait. Go a little farther. How about this mustache? What was the reason for his mustache? Know, right? He just loved having that mustache. He seemed a man from the 30s or 40s. Yeah, right. Yeah, he had a big beard. That's pretty cool. Point. So if people are interested in this book, how they can purchase it? They have to call me. They have to contact me. Okay, we're going to put your email in the description. Yeah. Can you limited edition cover displays an autograph containing the ashes of Mark Grunewald in keeping with his final wishes. So I didn't want somebody to say I thought so. Right. It's his final wishes. Wow. Because he wanted to be cremated. So I have his ashes. And so wait. Let's go back to his final issue. Final wishes. Yeah. Wishes again. What did he say again? He said, I want to be cremated and my ashes put into a comic book. So Marvel did one better. Yeah, they did some. Yeah. They put him into Squadron Supreme, which was his best-selling comic book. And this is not selling anymore, just a collectible, right? Yeah, it's I only did 5,000 copies, and each copy now is about $3,000 because I only did 5,000 copies. And so, then after Marvel published that, then you cannot do the same thing because of some loss. Then you did this book. Got it. They came back and said it sold too quickly. We needed to do another run, and so I went to get the ashes, and I couldn't find them. And I said, I bet he doesn't want to go in anymore. And it's a good thing I didn't give them all the ashes because I wouldn't be able to do this now. Oh, eventually you found that again. He was hiding on me. He knew that he didn't want to. I fulfilled his wish. But now he gave me the idea to do this. And I swear. So where were his ashes? They were right where they were supposed to be. When I went back, they were right there. Oh, wow. So it's some kind of a supernatural trick, right? I didn't see them. I don't know what. I was looking in the wrong place, and I was like, it's too cold and dark and spooky in here. Maybe you're also in a good place internally too, right? Yeah. And so I just was like, okay. And then so I have all these ashes now. And so I'm thinking, I can do another, book or whatever. And it's illegal now. I have to go over to China. Isn't it weird how the law can get so much into our personal lives, Right. And anyway, Catherine, I'm so grateful. That's it. I think it was a great interview, and some of the fans of Mark and Marvel, I think they would dig it. They're gonna love it. Oh, I know. And the fact is it's not what happens to you, it's your attitude towards it and your ability to overcome and use I call myself his legacy advocate now. So I have taken the role of being Mark's legacy advocate. And that's what gives me a lot of peace. And when you're married to a comic book guy, till death do you part, not so much. He's just and he would totally love what you're doing and appreciate too. So there is another thing that you did a few years ago, just to wrap up, just to compliment. You did an event or something. How was that event about? Well, I created with one of his fans this thing called Cosmoda. So imagine if Comic-Con had a baby with Fashion Week. That's what it is. So it's cosplayers, and it's also my designers who want to do fantasy looks. And it's on a runway, so it's cosplay runway. So Cosmoda is cosplay runway, and Dan Hort is my producer, who is a huge fan of Mark's growing up and has such respect and really understands his work. So when Mark and when Dan and I are on panels about Mark, I don't know the ins and outs of the business the way Dan does. And I can speak about the man. Dan can speak about
The
Mark,
professional.
the
Yeah.
work, and
So
how
does
it's a
this
perfect
events that you
match.
do sometimes, do you have a website for that, or are
Yes,
they
it's
gonna happen?
cosplayrunway.com.
Cosplayrunway. I'm gonna put in the description.
Yeah.
And it's every year.
Yeah, we're trying to do it twice a season, but now Dan moved down to Florida, sold his house. He opened a comic book store in the Barbados. And so I think the next thing we're going to do is a thing called Evening of Legends, because a lot of comic book guys have died. So we're going to do a legacy con, and we're going to honor a lot of people who have died, not just Mark, but a lot of major people have died in the industry, and we're going to do a whole con about that. So that's the next big thing. It's going to be in May 18th and 19th, and it's going to be a dinner, and
Where?
it's going to be at the Cradle of Aviation, which is a beautiful facility. Mark would have loved this facility. It's all about the space aviation and
Aeronautic.
space race. So they leave it, and you put all the tables, and so you're next to the lunar module. It's just it's called the Cradle of Aviation. So it's going to be out there, and they've given us the space for free. They're flying everybody
And
in.
do people, how can people go there? They buy tickets or something?
Yeah, they'll buy tickets, and it'll be on cosplayrunway.com. It'll be on
Cosplay run. COS play.
PLAY runway, cosplayrunway.com.
Cosplay.
And it's the same thing on Instagram.
Runway.com.
It's Cosmoda,
Okay.
COSMODA.
Okay, I'm going to put that in the description.
Yeah.
I think we need to wrap up now.
Yeah.
Have a great weekend, and thank you so much for your
know,
time.
my God. It's great. Okay? Went fast.
Oh, yeah. It's always like that. I told you 3 hours was not enough.
I know, because I'm old.
No, that's not it. The subject is really interesting. Okay.
Thanks, Moses. You give a great interview.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Ciao.